Chapter 2788. Illusory flames. While Lionheart agreed enthusiastically to Shifeng's offer, Yuluo looked at Shifeng in surprise. She never thought that Shifeng would actually be willing to sell the Crimson Dragon flying ship. In the modern god's domain, Zero Wing was the sole guild to own flying ships. Many superpowers wished to purchase one from Zero Wing. Yet Zero Wing had rejected all offers. Of course, everyone could also understand that decision. After all, Zero Wing could reap more advantages by monopolizing the flying ship than selling it. If news got out that Shifeng was selling a Crimson Dragon flying ship to the Skyflare adventurer team, the various superpowers operating in the modern era would definitely die of envy. However, what Yuluo wasn't aware of was that Shifeng had decided to sell Skyflare a flying ship because matters of the ancient era wouldn't influence the modern era. It was challenging for players of the modern era to visit the ancient era. And even if they managed to travel to the ancient era by luck, they wouldn't be able to stay for long. The number of players that could travel to the ancient era wouldn't be significant either. Likewise, the ancient era's players would have a tough time visiting the modern era. It was unlikely for the two worlds to have any major interaction with each other at this point. To put it simply, even if he sold a Crimson Dragon flying ship to the Skyflare adventurer team, Skyflare wouldn't affect Zero Wing's advantages in the modern era. Hence, he could trade some precious items to Skyflare without worry. Moreover, if Skyflare grew stronger in the ancient era, the adventurer team would also have an easier time collecting the ancient era's various resources for him. After all, he had neither the time nor the strength to establish his own force in the ancient era. In that case, relying on the local powers to secure resources was the next best option. Most importantly, the fewer the people that knew of the secret between the two worlds, the better. Otherwise, be it in the ancient god's domain or modern god's domain, he shouldn't think of living a peaceful life. Commander Lionheart, if you wish to purchase the flying ship, it will cost you 10,000 Titan silver ingots, 1,000 magic elven stones, and 1,007 luminaries crystals. Shifeng stated his price directly. For the time being, he could already secure more than enough magic crystals through exchanging the crystals of souls and soul water. Compared to magic crystals, he prioritized obtaining materials that were rare in the modern god's domain and 7 luminaries crystals. BSE rare/B. Moreover, trying to obtain these rare materials with the crystal of souls and soul water would be difficult since crystals of souls and soul water were non-essentials. After all, they merely increased players' chances of completing their Tier 4 promotion quest by a little. More precisely, the crystal of souls and soul water merely helped players complete their Tier 4 promotion quests ahead of time. In the case of players who never had a chance to complete their Tier 4 promotion quest to begin with, the items would be useless. This point was something anyone who had used the two items would know. Hence, while the various powers could accept using magic crystals, which were abundant, to exchange for crystals of souls and soul water, they would think twice if the requested currency was a strategic or rare material. After all, collecting these materials wasn't an easy task, and they were necessary for many applications. These materials basically served as the foundation of the various powers. That much. Lionheart frowned automatically when he heard Shifeng's price. Although he had known that the Crimson Dragon flying ship wouldn't be cheap, he never expected such a steep price. Titan silver and magic elven stone were precious resources essential to the construction of many buildings and the production of important items. As for the 7 luminaries crystal, it was something all players and powers coveted. The Skyflare adventurer team had gone to great lengths and sacrificed many experts to occupy a small area that generated 7 luminaries crystals. Moreover, Skyflare still had to station over 1,000 Tier 3 experts there to guard the area at all times. Meanwhile, the price of 1,007 luminaries crystals would basically zero out Skyflare's stockpile. Upon seeing Lionheart's reaction, Shifeng said unhurriedly, "Of course, this is only the first option, Commander Lionheart. You can also consider going with the second option, which is to let me invest in Skyflare and give me 5% of Skyflare's income in the future." 5%. Lionheart pondered Shifeng's offer carefully. Honestly speaking, 5% of the current Skyflare adventurer team's income wasn't a significant amount. However, the story would change when Skyflare grew stronger. In the long run, the income Skyflare lost would definitely far exceed the price of Shifeng's first offer. "Commander, my suggestion is to go with the first option, Wind Chaser whispered as he looked at Lionheart agonizing over Shurfang's offer. Although we'll be broke for some time after buying the flying ship, Skyflare's value will far exceed those resources in the future. Now that Skyflare already had 5 Tier 4 players, its future was promising. Giving away part of its income for just one flying ship was unnecessary. The other Skyflare executives also looked toward Lionheart, their eyes clearly conveying agreement with Wind Chaser. Taking a deep breath, Lionheart looked at Shurfang and said, "Brother Black Flame, I chose the first trading option. Once this operation is over, we can conduct the transaction in Meteorite City. However, the amount of materials you need is too significant. While we have enough 7 Luminaries crystals, I can't say the same for the Titan Silver and Magic Elven stones. I don't think we can meet your demands even if we take out Meteorite City's stockpile. We can, at most, fulfill 50% of your required amount. May I know if we can make up for the remaining amount using 100 top-tier epic weapons and equipment?" This, after giving the matter some thought, Shurfang said, "That's fine as well, but I will accept only level 150 epic weapons and equipment. In Meteorite City, the total value of 5,000 Titan Silver ingots and 500 Magic Elven stones was equivalent to 80 top-tier epic weapons and equipment, at most. Moreover, acquiring so many top-tier epic weapons and equipment wouldn't necessarily be possible. After all, while many NPC merchants in the Ancient Gods domain sold epic weapons and equipment, there was still a limit. This was especially true for top-tier epic weapons and equipment. Their rarity in the ancient era was not the slightest bit lower than in the modern era. Often, acquiring these items meant raiding mythic bosses and even superior mythic bosses. Bosses of such caliber were incredibly limited, and one would be fortunate to find even 20 of such bosses within Meteorite City's vicinity each week. Moreover, even if Skyflare now had many Tier 4 experts, raiding superior mythic bosses still carried great risks. Lionheart's offer of 100 top-tier epic weapons and equipment to make up for the difference was definitely favorable for Shurfang. Shurfang understood Lionheart's reason for doing so. In fact, if he were in Lionheart's shoes, he would go with such an option too. After all, the risks that came with giving away Skyflare's shares were massive. However, Shurfang didn't really mind Lionheart's choice either, since his initial goal was to obtain a large amount of Titan Silver, Magic Elven stones, and 7 Luminaries crystals. The second option wasn't actually a good option for him. After all, the number of times he could enter the Ancient Gods domain was limited. For Zero Wing, which was currently in dire need of resources, such a long-term investment wasn't desirable. This outcome was undoubtedly the best for Shurfang. Moreover, exchanging half of the required Titan Silver and Magic Elven stones into top-tier epic weapons and equipment was also a good deal for him. After all, the current Zero Wing hardly had any level 150 epic weapons and equipment. With these top-tier epic weapons and equipment, Zero Wing's executives would also have an easier time completing their Tier 4 promotion quests. "That won't be a problem." Lionheart nodded. Simultaneously, he revealed a bitter smile. For the sake of purchasing one Crimson Dragon flying ship, he had basically emptied out Skyflare's coffers. After this transaction, Skyflare would severely lack for not only magic crystals and various strategic resources but also weapons and equipment. However, despite knowing this, all of Skyflare's executives revealed ecstatic expressions on their faces. They also continuously admired and inspected the Crimson Dragon flying ship. It was as if they could already imagine the beautiful future that awaited Skyflare once they obtained the flying ship. The Crimson Dragon flying ship flew for a dozen hours or so. After passing through numerous large maps, it finally arrived at a dusky land. Despite flames burning everywhere, this land was heavily forested. As soon as everyone entered this map, they immediately felt their stamina and concentration depleting. In response, Crimson Billow drank a fire resistance potion. However, she still sensed her stamina and concentration decreasing gradually, and couldn't help feeling a little surprised. Fire resistance has no effect on the flames here. At this rate, I'm afraid we'll run out of stamina and die if we stay here for more than a dozen hours. Normally, an increase in a person's fire resistance would allow them to counter all debuffs from fire. However, her increased fire resistance was actually useless here. This situation was simply unprecedented. B greater than E/B. It seems that we'll have to move quickly. While sensing the changes in his own body, Wind Chaser said, "Otherwise, we'll probably be annihilated before we can kill that Tier 4 infant dragon." Nodding, Shurfeng promptly commanded, "All Tier 3s will remain on the flying ship, while Tier 4 spread out and search for the infant dragon. Once you locate the infant dragon, report back immediately." As soon as Shurfeng finished speaking, Skyflare's 5 Tier 4 players promptly floated up, ready to start looking for the Tier 4 infant dragon. Meanwhile, Lifeless Thorn, Solitary 9, and Yuluo, who had been concealing their auras with their black cloaks all this time, also gradually rose into the air, the sight attracting the attention of Skyflare's executives. "They're Tier 4s too?" Crimson Billow was shocked as she looked at Lifeless Thorn's group of 3. Although Shurfeng had already surprised her plenty of times, she still found it astonishing that the 3 players who had tagged along with Shurfeng were also Tier 4 players. After all, Tier 4 players were still rare in the entire God's domain. On average, a main city would only have 1 or 2 Tier 4 players. Yet, it was revealed that not only Shurfeng but even the people following him were Tier 4 players. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Since when were Tier 4 players as common as cabbages? It seems Black Flame has far more secrets than we think. Fortunately, we chose to partner with him. I really don't want to imagine what would have happened had we chosen to make an enemy out of him, Wind Chaser said, smiling bitterly. Yuluo aside, Lifeless Thorn and Solitary 9 were part of the group that entered Meteorite City with Shurfeng. Now that 3 out of the group of 5 were confirmed to be Tier 4 players, it wouldn't be strange that the other 2 players were hidden Tier 4s as well. To think that we were actually planning to use force if negotiations failed. In retrospect, Wind Chaser found their thoughts laughable. Subsequently, after Shurfeng's group of 9 searched for about half an hour, Crimson Billow's voice suddenly appeared in the team chat. "I found the infant dragon. It's resting inside a cave in the Southwest Valley." Chapter 2789 Dragons Might in a Cave on the southwestern side of the Ghostfire Hills. After Crimson Billow sent the infant dragon's coordinates, Shurfeng had quickly gathered everyone. Now, all 128 members of the team were sneaking deeper into the cave. The flames seemed to be getting stronger and stronger, Yuluo said worriedly when she sensed her stamina and concentration depleting at a quicker rate. Moreover, the burning sensation is also growing stronger the deeper we go. At this rate, I'm afraid the burning sensation will grow so strong that we won't be able to focus during the battle. Indeed, the burning sensation here is getting worse. Wind Chaser nodded in agreement. Under this burning sensation, I'm afraid ordinary Refinement Realm experts won't be able to exhibit combat standards at the Refinement Realm. Previously, the Illusory flames merely ate at his stamina and concentration. However, he now felt as if his whole body was scorching. Although the pain was subtle, it would still impact the performance of people with weak minds. Combat techniques, skills, and spells require precision control. Even a slight deviation could result in a massive difference in the combat power one could exhibit. After observing the environment, Lionheart suggested to Shurfeng, "Brother Black Flame, this cave is indeed extraordinary. I think our best option is to take the fight out of the cave. Otherwise, we'll have difficulty exerting our strength." "I'm afraid that won't do." Shaking his head, Shurfeng said with certainty, "We must finish the infant dragon in this cave. Moreover, this is most likely our only chance. Outside this cave, we'll have trouble even touching the infant dragon." Dragons were the rulers of the sky. On paper, fighting the infant dragon outside the cave might seem to be to their team's advantage. However, doing so would actually place their team at a disadvantage. This was especially true for the team's Tier 3 players. Without the help of special skills, Tier 3 players couldn't fly by themselves. Hence, if they fought the infant dragon outside, the team's Tier 3 members would get sidelined. As for utilizing the Crimson Dragon flying ship to fight the infant dragon, that was simply a joke. Against a Tier 4 infant dragon, even an advanced flying ship wouldn't last more than 3 or 4 hits. In fact, it wouldn't be strange if the Crimson Dragon flying ship fell after just one attack. After all, the flying ship was merely capable of withstanding the attacks of ordinary Tier 4 mythic monsters. Its defenses would crumble instantly before a Tier 5 attack. Shortly afterward, Shurfeng and the others came across Crimson Billow, hiding underneath a rock. At present, though, Crimson Billow had a wilted expression on her face. What happened? Lionheart asked strangely when he saw Crimson Billow's condition. It's nothing. Shaking her head, Crimson Billow smiled bitterly and said, I'm just wondering whether we can really win against that infant dragon. Although it is an infant dragon, our team isn't a pushover either. How would we know we can't win if we don't give it a try? Bloodblade said confidently as he looked at Crimson Billow's defeated expression. Don't forget that we have 9 Tier 4 players this time. That infant dragon is also only at Tier 4. However, after Bloodblade finished speaking, the cavern at the end of the road appeared in front of everyone, and a creature with a pale golden body over 100 meters long entered their sight. Infant Golden Dragon. Dragon Mythic. Level 140 HP 112 billion. How is this possible? Everyone gasped involuntarily when they saw the infant dragon's statistics. Even Lifeless Thorn and Solitary 9, who had seen a half-step Demon King before, were astonished. The infant golden dragon's stifling aura aside, just its HP of 112 billion was already plenty mind-boggling. With 112 billion HP, the infant dragon would recover 24 billion HP every 5 seconds, or roughly 400 million HP every second. Even assuming each of their Tier 4 players could cause 50 million damage per second, after excluding the 2 Tier 4 healers, they could deal only around 350 million damage per second with the remaining 7 Tier 4 players. Moreover, this was all under the premise that the infant dragon didn't possess a powerful defense and wouldn't put up any resistance. Not to mention, the infant dragon before them was part of the Golden Dragon tribe. Its bloodline was of a much higher purity than ordinary dragons. Among the dragon race, the Golden Dragon's bloodline was second only to divine dragons. It's no wonder they say dragons are invincible among existences of the same tier. With such HP, even if we can survive this infant dragon's attacks, I doubt we can actually kill it. Windchaser couldn't help feeling shaken. Although HP wasn't everything, it could still provide an intuitive gauge of an existence's general strength. With how much HP the infant dragon possessed, it was easy to imagine how terrifying its basic attributes were. They were definitely at least 2 or 3 times higher than those of the average superior mythic monster of the same level. What did that mean? With an attack from a superior mythic monster of the same level, a Tier 4 player would still receive significant damage, even if they merely defended themselves. However, if a Tier 4 player tried defending against one of the infant golden dragon's attacks, they would be fortunate to retain a scrap of HP to keep themselves alive. If they were unlucky, they would be one-shot. In other words, if their team wished to fight the infant golden dragon, they couldn't allow even a graze from it. Otherwise, lives would be lost. At this moment, Lionheart and the other Skyflare executives finally understood why Shurfeng didn't assign healers to any of the Tier 3 combat squadrons. After all, Tier 3 players would be no different from ants in the upcoming battle. They were insignificant existences that would disappear upon coming into contact with even the slightest shockwave. Hence, there was naturally no need to assign healers to them. An infant golden dragon? Shurfeng also smiled bitterly when he saw the mountain-like dragon before him. No wonder this quest was evaluated at the inferior mythic rank. This Tier 4 infant golden dragon's combat power reached the Tier 5 intermediate rank. Even Froberto in his heyday wouldn't be a match for this infant dragon. In other words, the infant dragon simply wasn't an existence Tier 4 players could hope to confront. Possibly, only Tier 4 experts wielding legendary weapons and geared in legendary equipment could hope to defeat the infant golden dragon. Otherwise, the best option for players coming across this infant dragon was to obey their instincts and flee immediately. Brother Black Flame. At this time, Lionheart couldn't help but look at Shurfeng and shake his head. Although I don't want to say it, I'm afraid there really is no hope of killing this infant golden dragon. After seeing the infant golden dragon for himself, he finally understood that the records in books weren't entirely trustworthy. After all, the infant dragon before him was many times more terrifying than what was described in the library books he read. It simply wasn't an existence Tier 4 players could hope to fight. At the very least, it is absolutely impossible for their present selves. Most likely, only Tier 4 NPCs would have a glimmer of hope. No, that's not necessarily true, Shurfeng said, shaking his head. A hint of determination appearing in his eyes, he continued, We're not exactly out of options. It's just that we'll need to gamble. Killing this Tier 4 infant golden dragon was imperative. However, it wasn't just for the sake of completing his inferior mythic quest, but because he couldn't continue staying in the ancient god's domain. After all, his initial goal in visiting the Earthfall secret land was simply to acquire the necessary resources for constructing the small mobile fortress. Now that he had achieved his goal, he couldn't remain here, as there were still many things he needed to attend to in the modern god's domain. Meanwhile, killing the infant dragon before him was his best chance to attract the world's attention and get the world to banish him from the ancient god's domain. Gamble. Lionheart was slightly surprised by Shurfeng's words. He simply couldn't see how they could possibly defeat the infant dragon before them. I will start chanting an incantation in a moment, and it will most likely cause quite a commotion. So, I will need you to erect a magic barrier now to prevent the infant dragon from noticing it, Shurfeng said, taking a deep breath. As for the subsequent battle, I will need you, Commander Lionheart, to act as support. Both you Luo and Fated Fern will be tasked with healing you. 9. You'll protect the healer squadron. As for the healer squadron, use everything you have to heal my summoned creature. Do not stop for even a moment. Summoned creature? Lionheart and the others were confused by Shurfeng's words. They found it hard to imagine that any summoned creature could stop the infant golden dragon for even a moment. Despite their doubts, everyone still obeyed Shurfeng's commands. The next moment, over 100 people each took out a magic array scroll from their bags and instantly erected a barrier to isolate the tunnel from the cavern. With this magic barrier present, the infant golden dragon wouldn't detect anything they did inside the barrier, even if it was awake right now. Brother Black Flame, everything is ready. You can begin whenever you want, Lionheart said. Looking at the advanced magic array, he couldn't help feeling a little heartache. However, to avoid disturbing the infant golden dragon, they had no choice but to use it. Meanwhile, after Shurfeng personally verified that everything was set up correctly, he took out the Bible of Darkness and began chanting an incantation. Originally, he had not planned to use the Bible of Darkness. After all, the cost of using it at Tier 4 was far too great. He estimated that after a few more uses, his soul would get devoured by the power of darkness. However, if he wished to slay the infant golden dragon now, he could only take the risk. Immediately after Shurfeng began chanting, the mana inside the barrier gave off a bone-chilling sensation, the complete opposite of the burning sensation it gave off previously. Before anyone could react to the change, the barrier's interior suddenly went dark. Everyone could feel endless loneliness, coldness, and despair coming from the darkness around them. Standing in this dark environment didn't feel the slightest bit better than standing in the infant dragon's presence. As Shurfeng continued incanting, the infant golden dragon slumbering outside the barrier suddenly opened its eyes as if startled awake. Its massive eyes then looked directly at the barrier-enveloped tunnel vigilantly. How is this possible? Fated Fern, who was hosting the magic barrier, was stunned by this development. The advanced magic array they used, Spatial Wall, could thoroughly isolate an area from the outside world. Even if a large explosion went off inside the barrier, nobody in the outside world should be able to notice it. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Nonetheless, the infant dragon had clearly noticed them. What a despicable dark energy. Looking at the empty tunnel before it, the infant golden dragon bellowed, "It seems you humans have fallen as well. To think you would actually come seeking death together with a demon." The infant dragon's bellow instantly extinguished the advanced magic barrier like a storm blowing out a candle. Simultaneously, the figures of Shurfeng and the others appeared before the infant dragon. Brother Black Flame? Seeing that the infant dragon had already stood up, Lionheart raised his shield anxiously. He then sent a sidelong glance at Shurfeng and asked, "Are you still not done?" The power of the dragon before them far exceeded his expectations. Normally, even mythic monsters couldn't destroy the spatial wall so easily. Yet the infant dragon had accomplished this feat with just one roar. He simply didn't dare imagine how powerful an actual attack from the infant dragon would be. "I'm done. I made it just in time," Shurfeng said, a smile appearing on his pale face. As soon as Shurfeng finished speaking, a dark void appeared in the cavern's ceiling. A stone door even larger than the infant golden dragon then fell out of this void. Before the players and infant dragon could react to this turn of events, the stone door gradually opened. Chapter 2790. Heaven-defying battle. The demon gate inside the cavern opened. However, when the door was only partly open, a cold voice suddenly came from beyond it. Shifeng's group and the awakened infant golden dragon shuddered involuntarily upon hearing this voice. A little golden lizard and a heaven-blessed individual. Wait, no, you're not in existence of this world. Interesting. How interesting. Oh, the Bible of Darkness is actually damaged? Wonderful. This is truly wonderful. The demonic words that came out of the door echoed in everyone's mind. Although the voice spoke in a calm tone, the aura escaping the door paralyzed everyone momentarily. The infant golden dragon glared at the door in fear. A Tier 5 demon king? Shifeng was astonished when he sensed the frightening aura from the demon gate. According to his expectations, he would already be fortunate if he could summon even a demon prince. After all, the Bible of Darkness had yet to reach its perfect state. However, the existence behind the demon gate was undoubtedly much stronger than a demon prince. In fact, none of the Tier 5 existences he had come across thus far had exuded such a powerful aura. This book isn't suitable for a little guy like you. Give it to me. Only if it is in my hands can I truly descend onto this land. At the Demon King's words, Shifeng suddenly sensed his control over the Bible of Darkness waning, and the Bible actually started flying toward the demon gate. Seeing this, Shifeng couldn't help being shocked. He never thought that a demon could resist and manipulate the Bible of Darkness's power. Hurriedly, he used all his strength to wrestle back control over the Bible of Darkness. Stop wasting your energy, little fellow. I will be taking this damaged Bible of Darkness. However, you can also rest assured. Once my clan and I thoroughly descend upon this world, I will make sure to spare you. At these words, the Bible of Darkness struggled even harder to break free from Shifeng's grasp. In fact, his connection with the Bible of Darkness was even severed completely, and the only thing he could do now was hold on to the book with brute force. Despicable human, you actually dared summon that thing here. The infant golden dragon bellowed. Evidently, it had figured out the identity of the existence beyond the demon gate. I will not let you succeed. Die. After letting out a roar, the infant dragon suddenly widened its mouth. Immediately afterward, a threefold magic array took shape before it. Not good. It's using dragon breath. Everyone dodge quickly. Shifeng shouted, surprised by the infant dragon's actions. A Tier 4 dragon breath would undoubtedly carry power at the Tier 5 intermediate rank standard. Let alone Tier 3 players, even Tier 4 players would die if they faced it. The only way they could survive this attack was to dodge it. However, the infant golden dragon was simply too fast. Before anyone could react, the threefold magic array had already taken shape. The next moment, a destructive energy ball shot out of the infant dragon's mouth. The energy ball's speed and size making it impossible for anyone to avoid in time. Everyone could only watch as the dragon breath approached them. It's over. Lionheart reflexively closed his eyes when he saw the approaching dragon breath that destroyed everything in its path. As for everyone else, they also revealed looks of despair and bitter smiles. Previously, they thought that they still stood a chance against the infant golden dragon, albeit a small chance. However, after seeing the destructive power the dragon breath carried, they realized that any form of resistance would be meaningless. The only thing they could do was wait for death. However, just when the dragon breath was about to reach Shifeng and the others, that cold voice came from the half-open demon gate again. A little lizard thinks it can stop my descent? An illusory hand suddenly appeared out of thin air before Shifeng's team and caught the approaching energy ball. The giant hand then squeezed the energy ball, shattering it into countless dispersing particles of light. How is this possible? Everyone was thunderstruck by this scene. The dragon breath that carried such devastating power had actually been stopped so easily. They couldn't even begin to imagine how powerful the demon behind the demon gate was. However, despite this sudden turn of events, Shifeng's complexion did not improve. On the contrary, it even turned gloomier instead. Despite being only halfway summoned, the summoned Demon King could already exert enough strength to block a Tier 4 dragon breath casually. The Demon King's strength was definitely at the Tier 5 peak rank. This meant that the existence beyond the Demon Gate wasn't just an ordinary Tier 5 Demon King. It was a Tier 5 Great Demon King. If Shifeng allowed a Great Demon King to descend onto God's domain, even if it was the ancient God's domain, it would still spell disaster for the entire continent. B however, before Shifeng and the others could recover from their surprise, the infant golden dragon suddenly appeared above them. At this time, golden runes covered its body, and the aura it exuded was significantly stronger than before. It can still become stronger? When Shifeng looked at the infant golden dragon in the air, he was genuinely shocked for the first time in a long while. After all, the infant golden dragon was much stronger than he expected. Comparable to Tier 5 existences? What a joke. The aura and power the infant golden dragon currently displayed had already more than doubled. It was definitely much stronger than ordinary Tier 5 existences. In fact, he doubted he could survive one attack from it even if he activated his berserk skill. Despicable demon, you can't use your full strength while behind that door. I refuse to believe you can keep blocking my attacks. So long as your summoner dies, you will have to remain in that endless abyss forever. The infant golden dragon glared at the demon gate, a hint of disdain and mockery in its eyes. It then opened its mouth and launched another dragon breath. This dragon breath was much more terrifying than before. As soon as the infant dragon inhaled, Shifeng and the others sensed the mana within the cavern disappear completely. In addition, the Tier 3 players even had their mana rapidly sucked from their bodies. And although the Tier 4 players managed to prevent their mana from getting plundered, their ability to manipulate mana was greatly hindered. Now they couldn't even exhibit half of their usual combat power. This is that infant dragon's true strength? Bloodblade fell into despair as he looked at the massive figure in the air. Seeing it now, he couldn't help but find their previous notion of challenging the Tier 4 infant dragon laughable. The infant golden dragon was much stronger than what its HP portrayed. It simply wasn't an existence Tier 4 players could hope to challenge. This moment drove home to Shifeng why the quest he received was of the inferior mythic rank. He also understood why humans capable of slaying dragons were highly praised in God's domain. It would already be a miracle if a human could fight a dragon of the same tier and level to a standstill, let alone kill one. This was especially true for dragons that had reached Tier 4 or above. It wouldn't even be an exaggeration to refer to such a feat as a myth. Roar! Accompanied by a deafening roar, a dazzling energy sphere carrying devastating power descended toward the team. Little lizard, you have truly angered me now. The infant golden dragon's efforts to prevent the great demon king beyond the demon gate from descending enraged him. Suddenly, boundless power of darkness flooded out of the demon gate. A gigantic hand 5 times larger than the one before emerged from the ground. The hand was so massive that the infant dragon looked like a toy in comparison. Boom! Not only did the gigantic hand shatter the dragon breath instantly, but it even grabbed the infant dragon. And despite the infant dragon struggling desperately to break free, the giant hand remained unfazed as it smashed the infant dragon into the ground. Boom! A crater with a radius of 1,000 yards and a depth of 100 meters appeared on the cavern floor. Apart from the Tier 4 players and the Tier 3 healers, who had consumed Master Steel potions, the other players in the cavern were instantly killed by the resulting shockwave. Although Shifeng and the Tier 4 players remained alive, they had lost over 2/3 of their HPs. As for the surviving healers, their HPs had also fallen to a critical level. They had very nearly lost their lives. Meanwhile, after the dust in the vast cavern dissipated, the giant hand was nowhere in sight. The only thing in the crater was the infant golden dragon. Presently, however, the infant dragon had both its wings broken, with blood flowing out from all over its body. Its life aura had also weakened significantly, and its HP had even fallen to just 63%. Given the infant dragon's current state, it was evident that the Great Demon King's attack had heavily injured it. How strong! So this is the strength of a Tier 5 Great Demon King? Shifeng was dumbfounded by this outcome. The infant golden dragon had put its all into the last attack, and the attack's power had definitely reached the Tier 5 advanced rank standard. Yet, it still suffered a brutal beating. The difference in strength between the infant dragon and Great Demon King was clear for all to see. In fact, if not for the Demon Gate severely dampening the Great Demon King's strength, the infant dragon would have most likely died from that one attack. Meanwhile, after the great demon king executed this attack, his control over the Bible of Darkness had also weakened significantly. At the very least, Shifeng could now sense a connection between him and the Bible of Darkness. Shifeng hurriedly cancelled the summoning. Previously, due to the severance of his connection with the Bible of Darkness, he couldn't stop the summoning even if he wanted to. However, now that he had recovered a small portion of control over the Bible of Darkness, he could cancel the summoning. As for the cost of forcibly canceling the summoning, he couldn't care less about it right now. After all, if he allowed a Tier 5 Great Demon King to descend onto the continent, only death awaited him. Moreover, the cost of this death wouldn't just be a loss of 1 or 2 levels. Instead, his body might very well end up a puppet of the Great Demon King, and he would have no choice but to retrain a new account. Hence, he absolutely couldn't let the Great Demon King exit the Demon Gate, even if doing so would leave himself in a weakened state. You damned heaven-blessed individual. I will make you pay a heavy price the next time we meet. Upon seeing the Demon Gate closing, the Great Demon King bellowed angrily and repeatedly attacked the door, causing it to tremble violently. Fortunately, the Demon Gate was sufficiently powerful. No matter how much the Great Demon King assailed it, the Demon Gate continued closing at a steady pace. Finally, 20 seconds later, the Demon Gate closed and disappeared from this space, leaving behind only the heavily injured infant golden dragon and Shifeng's team in the cavern. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You Brother Black Flame, what should we do now? Lionheart asked in an uncertain voice after seeing the Demon Gate disappear. He didn't know whether they should flee or try to kill the infant golden dragon while it was heavily injured. Although the infant dragon was significantly weaker than before, it was still much stronger than superior mythic monsters of the same level. Is there even a need to ask? Looking at the infant dragon that was struggling to stand up, Shifeng said in a determined tone, "Now is our only chance to slay this infant dragon. With our strength we can't defeat it in its peak state. Don't tell me you're willing to miss out on such an opportunity, Commander Lionheart?" At Shifeng's words, Lifeless Thorn and Solitary 9 nodded in agreement. If the infant golden dragon wasn't heavily injured, killing it with their present strength was nigh impossible. Only Tier 5 players could possibly go up against it. I guess you're right. As Lionheart looked at the infant golden dragon, a trace of determination also appeared in his eyes. He then said, "Since that's the case, let's kill it before it recovers." After saying so, Lionheart raised his shield and led the charge against the infant golden dragon, with all the other Tier 4s except for Shifeng following close at his heels. Chapter 2791. Infant Golden Dragons Fall, Insignificant Humans. Do you think you can insult me just because I am heavily injured? When the infant golden dragon saw Lionheart and the other Tier 45 charging toward it, anger flared in its amber pupils, and it let loose a deafening roar. A shockwave immediately spread from the infant dragon to its surroundings. Boom! 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 A series of collisions echoed throughout the cavern as Lionheart and the others got hit by the shockwave. Aside from Lionheart and Solitary 9, everyone else on the team went flying back several dozen meters, a stinging pain washing through their bodies. They also lost over 2 million HP from the attack. Lifeless Thorn and the others, who only had around 6 million HP, had basically lost 1/3 of their HPs to the shockwave. It's still so strong even after getting injured? Everyone gasped when they saw their own HP bar. The infant golden dragon was clearly extremely weakened right now, yet it still managed to inflict so much damage with only its roar. Its strength was simply terrifying. At this time, even Shifeng was stunned by this situation. In addition to its heavy injuries, the infant dragon was also suffering from the heavenly dragon's breath suppression. Otherwise, everyone would have most likely lost over half of their HP from the shockwave. Tier 3 healers, keep up. Restore the damage dealer's HP with everything you've got. Don't stop even for a moment. Shifeng, who was currently incapacitated due to the backlash from forcibly canceling the demon summoning, hurriedly issued commands across the distance. Yuluo and Faded Fern, you two prioritize healing Lionheart and 9. Make sure their HPs are full at all times. At Shifeng's command, Faded Fern, a Tier 4 oracle, swung her staff and double-cast 2 Tier 3 curses. Tier 3 Defensive Curse, Contract Barrier. Tier 3 Strengthening Curse, Heavenly God's Prayer. Immediately, a translucent barrier formed around the bodies of Lionheart and Solitary 9. Simultaneously, divine runes appeared on the bodies of everyone on the team, doubling everyone's resistances and defense and increasing everyone's physique by 20% for 20 minutes. She even has a Tier 3 AoE Strengthening Curse? Shurfeng was surprised as he looked at Faded Fern. Strengthening spells were incredibly rare in God's domain. In fact, they were 10 times rarer than ordinary curses of the same tier. This was especially true for AoE strengthening spells. The value of such a spell was practically equivalent to a fragmented legendary item. In his previous life, any player who wielded strengthening spells would receive the VIP treatment from the various superpowers. This was because, unlike Berserk skills, strengthening spells had short cooldowns and long durations. An AoE strengthening spell could elevate a team's combat power to a whole other level. In the past, one of the reasons Violet Cloud was recognized as one of the 10 great cleric gods was her possession of many AoE strengthening spells. This prompted the various superpowers to desperately seek her. As far as Shurfeng knew, nobody in the modern god's domain had gained a strengthening spell even now. Yet, not only did Faded Fern possess a strengthening spell, but it was even of the AoE variety. How could he not be surprised by this situation? Meanwhile, after Faded Fern cast Heavenly God's Prayer, the team's overall combat power evidently rose by a slight margin. Good. Let's continue. After seeing the barrier protecting his body, Lionheart charged forward once more. This time, the infant dragon no longer attacked with its roar. Instead, it swept its tail at the approaching players. However, despite seeing the tail that shattered even space itself bearing down on him, Lionheart did not back away. Instead, he raised his shield and stood his ground. He then activated the Tier 3 defensive skill, Blood Cloud. A crimson barrier appeared before his body, one capable of absorbing 6 attacks. Although the barrier could fully nullify only attacks at the Tier 4 standard and below, it could still diminish the damage of Tier 5 attacks. Boom! The blood cloud instantly exploded upon coming into contact with the infant dragon's tail. However, thanks to the blood cloud dampening the blow, Lionheart only stumbled 2 steps backward and lost a little over 6 million HP. For Lionheart, who had already reached level 137 and possessed 2 million HP, this amount of damage was still tolerable. Upon seeing that Lionheart could take on the infant dragon's attacks, everyone else on the team breathed out a sigh of relief and began assaulting the infant dragon. Bloodblade used his Tier 4 legacy skill Storm Dance. Lifeless Thorn also used his Tier 4 legacy skill Lightning Serpent. Tier 4 skills and spells bombarded the infant dragon's body one after another, every one of them dealing over 50 million damage, with some even doing over 100 million critical damage. However, compared to the infant dragon's remaining 60 billion HP, this amount of damage appeared minuscule. Is the damage still not enough? Shurfeng frowned when he saw the result of the frenzied barrage. Apart from Lionheart, the 5 other Tier 4 players fighting were currently attacking the infant dragon with everything they had. Yet, the damage they caused just barely exceeded the infant dragon's battle recovery. Moreover, this was with the infant dragon's battle recovery half due to its heavy injuries. The Tier 3 healers healing from a distance also couldn't help growing anxious in this situation. At this rate, their team would need more than an hour to finish the battle. Meanwhile, 1 hour was definitely more than enough for the infant golden dragon to recover from its injuries. If that happened, they would be doomed. Lionheart and the others were also aware of the situation. However, this was already the best they could do. Although they could activate their berserk skills to raise their damage output temporarily, doing so would be meaningless, and would prompt the infant dragon to enter its berserk phase earlier. At that time, without their berserk skills, they would be utterly incapable of defending against the infant dragon's attacks. Do any of you have combat resurrection? Shurfeng asked the 12 Tier 3 healers behind him. In the ancient god's domain, ordinary resurrection methods couldn't resurrect players on the spot. One special type of resurrection method could. However, the player resurrected through this method would suffer a higher death penalty. I do. 8 of the Tier 3 healers responded to Shurfeng's question. Good. Go and resurrect the 8 players with the highest strength. Shifeng breathed out a sigh of relief when he saw how many responses he received. The next moment, the 8 healers with combat resurrection resurrected 8 of Skyflare's fallen members. Take these spears and divide them among yourselves. After looking at the 8 resurrected players, Shifeng took out the 600+ thunder spears stored in his bag. Drink a master strength potion and activate your berserk skills. Afterward, use everything you have to throw these spears at the infant dragon. It's best if you can use up all these spears before your berserk skills run out. Don't hold back. Yes, sir. The 8 players nodded, fully understanding Shifeng's intentions. As Tier 3 melee players, they couldn't even be considered cannon fodder in front of the Tier 4 infant dragon. After all, if they tried moving up close to the dragon, they would instantly die to any random roar. The only way they could contribute to the raid was by relying on external items. Only then would they have a chance of dealing damage to the infant dragon. The 8 players consumed the master strength potions they had prepared beforehand, which increased their strength attribute by 70% for 3 minutes. They then activated their respective berserk skills, further improving their basic attributes. In terms of strength, the 8 of them could already rival mythic monsters of the same level. After seeing the infant dragon swing its tail, exposing its back, Shifeng ordered attack. Aim at the dragon's injuries or the reverse scale on its back. At Shifeng's command, the 8 melee players promptly threw the thunder spears they held with all their might. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The next moment, 8 lightning arcs cut through space and landed on the infant dragon's injuries and reverse scale. Roar! The infant dragon roared in pain at the attacks. Simultaneously, damages exceeding 50 million appeared above its head one after another. There was even one critical hit that dealt over 130 million damage. The 8 melee players' attacks were not the slightest bit weaker than those of Lifeless Thorn and the other Tier 4 combatants. Only the frequency of their attacks was slightly inferior. Good. Next volley. Seeing that the attacks were highly effective, Shifeng promptly called for another attack. In response, the 8 melee players each took out another thunder spear and hurled the weapons at the infant dragon. When the attacks connected, the infant dragon's HP bar finally shrank, albeit slightly. As expected of the commander. We have a chance now. Solitary 9 couldn't help growing excited when he saw the rate of the infant dragon's HP decrease accelerating. Crimson Billow, who was frantically attacking the infant dragon, looked toward Shifeng in surprise despite herself. He still has a trump card? She never thought that Shifeng could actually add 8 more Tier 4 combatants to the fight. Now, with their damage output, killing the infant dragon within a short period was entirely possible. The infant golden dragon's HP continuously decreased over time. 60%, 40%, 30%. The speed at which the infant dragon lost HP was nothing like before. Only, in exchange for this boost in DPS, the supply of thunder spears declined rapidly. In just 2 minutes, the 8 Tier 3 players had already used up more than 400 thunder spears. Everyone be careful. It's going berserk. Shifeng warned when he saw that the infant dragon's HP bar had fallen to a critical level. As soon as Shifeng finished speaking, the infant dragon suddenly let out an angry roar. Simultaneously, the dragon's body gave off a dazzling golden glow, and its eyes turned bloodshot. It had evidently entered a berserk state. Alright. Since Brother Black Flame has let us see his cards, let's show him ours as well. Glancing at Faded Fern, Lionheart shouted, "Fern, it's your turn now. Leave it to me." Faded Fern smiled. She then took out the Tier 5 sealing crystal from her bag and began chanting an incantation. Immediately, as if time had frozen, silence fell over the entire cavern. The only exception to this phenomenon was the gradually shattering crystal in Faded Fern's hand. Before the infant golden dragon could smash its claw at Lionheart, a magic spear several hundred meters long suddenly appeared above the infant dragon and struck its head. Tier 5 spell Destruction Spear. Boom! The infant dragon's titanic body instantly collapsed to the ground, the impact creating a crater several dozen meters deep. The space surrounding the crater even turned into a dark void. The next moment, a damage value exceeding 10 billion appeared above the infant dragon's head. In addition, not only did the infant dragon's berserk state get interrupted, But the infant dragon was even powerless to push itself off the ground. The power of the destruction spear stupefied everyone present. Even Shifeng never thought that the sealing crystal would hold such a powerful spell. The destruction spear was just slightly inferior to the Great Demon King's attack from before. Good. Everyone attack with everything you've got. Shifeng shouted. Ignoring the fact that he was still in a weakened state, he activated Power of Darkness, which allowed him to move his body. He then charged straight at the incapacitated infant dragon. As for everyone else, they too activated their berserk skills at Shifeng's command, instantly doubling their basic attributes. Damages exceeding 100 million appeared above the infant dragon's head one after another. 10%, 6%, 3%. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Just as the infant dragon was about to recover from its incapacitated state, Shifeng activated Divine Providence before using his strongest trump card. Tier 3 skill Blade Awakening. Tier 4 skill Lightning Edge. The next moment, Shifeng, who had entered a transcendent state, brandished the abyssal blade. A river of light then descended upon the infant golden dragon's body. Minus 135,474,514. Minus 129,435,471. Minus 264,854,214. A series of damages exceeding 100 million appeared above the infant golden dragon's head in rapid succession, the attack thoroughly plundering its remaining HP. Chapter 2792. Astonishing Harvest. The infant golden dragon uttered a mournful cry as its titanic body crashed to the ground. Subsequently, an unprecedented silence descended on the cavern. We did it. We succeeded. Everyone heaved a deep sigh of relief when they looked at the infant dragon's corpse lying on the ground. Simultaneously, an indescribable sense of joy and excitement also appeared on their faces. After all, they had just created a miracle, a full dragon-slaying battle. Even if their opponent was merely a Tier 4 infant dragon, they had still slain a real dragon. The next moment, before the survivors of the team could recover from their joy, brilliant flashes suddenly enveloped their bodies as their experience bars filled up rapidly. The amount of EXP the infant golden dragon awarded was leagues above the EXP from ordinary mythic bosses. Even Shifeng leveled up 3 times consecutively, reaching 32% of level 140. As for everyone else, they gained even more levels from the raid, with Lionheart reaching level 141, and Yuluo reaching level 139. Lifeless Thorn and Solitary 9 even went from level 127 to level 138. The amount of EXP everyone received stupefied them. Nobody thought that killing a level 140 infant dragon would grant so much EXP. Of those present, only Shifeng and Lionheart did not place much concern on their levels. After all, as veteran Tier 4 players, they knew very clearly how easy it was for Tier 4 players to gain levels. In fact, they could most likely attain level 150 in 10 days, reaching the minimum requirement to challenge their Tier 5 promotion. However, players would not necessarily be able to get promoted to Tier 5 just by meeting the level requirement. After all, players would have to create a powerful mana body of their own. Compared to the levels he gained, Shifeng was much more concerned about the infant golden dragon's loot. The infant golden dragon they had killed was a dragon in the truest sense, not one that the main god system had weakened drastically. This point was clear just from the EXP the infant golden dragon awarded. Compared to the magic dragon clan that Shifeng had killed some time back, the infant golden dragon was like an entirely different creature. Some time after the infant golden dragon died, sacred light descended from the cavern ceiling, illuminating the entire cavern. Simultaneously, melodious hymns also echoed in everyone's mind. It seems Divine Providence did its job. Shifeng sighed in relief when he saw the sacred light shining down from the ceiling. Although Divine Providence increased his luck attribute significantly, the hidden attributes effects would be diminished when dealing with monsters at the superior mythic standard or above. And while the infant golden dragon was considered only a mythic monster, it was still part of the dragon race. It was far stronger than ordinary superior mythic monsters of the same level. Hence, the fact that he managed to trigger a divine hymn was truly a stroke of luck. Of course, part of the reason he managed to trigger a divine hymn was most likely this being the first kill of a real dragon in the ancient god's domain. Meanwhile, as the divine hymn descended, a system notification also entered everyone's ears. System. Congratulations. You have killed a Tier 4 infant golden dragon. You have obtained the Dragon Slayer title, World Reputation plus 100, and 1 gold legacy treasure chest. Crap. There's such a benefit as well? Bloodblade was astonished when he saw the system notification. Initially, he thought that they would be working for Shurfeng for free. He never imagined that slaying the infant dragon would earn them such astonishing rewards too. At this time, even Lionheart was surprised by this situation. After all, the rewards were simply too lucrative. Firstly, the Dragon Slayer title would allow them to enjoy the status of a high noble in the various cities of God's domain. In fact, their authority would be even greater than the typical high nobles, close to reaching that of a city lord. Not to mention, with the Dragon Slayer title equipped, their basic attributes and physique would increase by 20% when dealing with dragon-type monsters in the future. As for the awarded gold legacy treasure chest, it was something all Tier 4 players would dream of obtaining. The gold legacy treasure chest had a considerable chance of awarding a legacy book, which would grant the user with a significant number of legacy skill points when used. The treasure chest also had a high chance of containing rare Tier 4 skill and spell books, as well as a small chance of containing a legacy guidance for the road beyond Tier 4. These rewards were far more valuable than weapons, equipment, and magic crystals. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that the gold legacy treasure chest's value was equivalent to a fragmented legendary items. For some people, the treasure chest was even better than a fragmented legendary item. Meanwhile, aside from the reward notification, Shurfeng, Lifeless Thorn, Solitary 9, and Yuluo received a second system notification. System. Warning. The world of God's domain has noticed your existence as an outsider. You will be expelled from the world in 1 natural day. Sure enough, it was a success. Shurfeng revealed a faint smile upon seeing the system warning. If killing the infant golden dragon and altering a small portion of God's domain's history could not get him out of the ancient God's domain, he would really have a headache. After all, he had already achieved his original goal in coming here, and he still had many matters he needed to deal with in the modern God's domain. He simply couldn't afford to waste time here. As for the matter of earning various resources here, that was supposed to be a long-running project. Moreover, the amount of resources he could obtain depended entirely on the Skyflare Adventurer team's strength and resources. Meanwhile, Skyflare's development couldn't be accomplished overnight. This is great. I can finally go home. As for Yuluo, she too grew joyful when she saw the system warning. In fact, she felt even happier at seeing this system warning than when she received the gold legacy treasure chest. While everyone rejoiced over the gold legacy treasure chest they received, over 100 items appeared in midair and began descending to the ground. The sight of the infant golden dragon's loot made everyone present momentarily forget about the legacy treasure chest. BAOI/B. The aura of items can actually reach such an intensity? Crimson Billow was astonished as she studied the items that were gradually piling up on the ground. Just what kind of items dropped? Could there be a legendary item? This question plagued everyone's mind. The reason for everyone's reaction was the aura that the infant dragon's loot radiated, which practically rivaled that of superior mythic monsters. Even ordinary Tier 3 players would have to expend a lot of effort just to approach the loot. At this time, only Shurfeng managed to remain relatively calm. This was because he had heard of other people slaying dragons before. Only, the dragons that the God-ranked expert teams killed back then weren't Tier 4 infant dragons but adult dragons at the peak of Tier 5. According to what he had heard, the sight of those dragons' loot was truly a spectacle to behold. Just the visual phenomenon the loot created had covered a radius of over 10,000 yards. The combined aura the items radiated had also been so powerful that even Tier 4 players couldn't approach the loot. Only Tier 5 players and above could do so. In comparison, the visual phenomenon created by the infant golden dragon's loot only covered a radius of several hundred yards. The aura the loot radiated was so weak that even Tier 3 peak experts could approach it if they gritted their teeth. Hence, Shurfeng didn't find this outcome particularly surprising. However, the infant golden dragon's loot and Tier 5 adult dragon's loot wouldn't actually have a significant difference in quality. What difference in quality there was would only be akin to the difference between an epic item and a fragmented legendary item. It wouldn't be as significant as the difference between a fragmented legendary item and a legendary item. After all, both kills were dragons. One side was just slightly stronger. Moreover, as Tier 6 God-ranked experts were responsible for killing the adult dragons, the loot quality was reduced. In comparison, their team had defeated a Tier 4 infant dragon without a single Tier 5 player on the team. If one were to talk about raid difficulty, their team faced a much greater difficulty than the Tier 6 God-ranked expert teams. I wonder if it dropped a complete sync guidance. If one did drop, I might be able to improve my mana body further. Shifeng prayed inwardly as he looked at the items slowly piling up on the ground. At this time, compared to materials, weapons, and equipment, what he hoped to obtain more was a legacy guidance. This was typical of Tier 4 experts. After all, even with multiple fragmented legendary items, a Tier 4 expert wouldn't be able to go up against Tier 5 existences. As for the possibility of the infant golden dragon dropping a legendary item, that was utterly impossible. As far as Shifeng knew, players couldn't obtain legendary items through killing monsters. It didn't matter even if the monster in question was a dragon. At best, monsters would only drop fragmented legendary items that could be repaired into legendary items. Thus, every legendary item was incredibly precious, and a Tier 5 expert would be fortunate to obtain even one. After another dozen seconds or so passed, all of the items finally landed on the ground. Shifeng immediately approached the mountain of loot and began sorting through it. The spectating Skyflare members couldn't help drooling, wishing they could help Shifeng with the loot. Guild leader Black Flame has really hit the jackpot this time. I wonder if a legendary item dropped? If he gets a legendary item, his combat power would most likely skyrocket and approach the Tier 5 standard. Wind Chaser sighed as he enviously watched Shifeng collect the loot. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. He finally understood how big a gap divided Tier 4 and Tier 5 existences. It was even larger than the gap between Tier 3 and Tier 4 existences. Ordinary weapons and equipment couldn't make up for this gap. Only the rumored legendary weapons and equipment might work. If Shifeng could get himself a legendary weapon now, he would truly become an invincible existence. After all, no Tier 4 player could go up against Tier 5 existences yet. Meanwhile, after working non-stop for 10 minutes, Shifeng finally finished sorting through the loot. Once he organized the loot, he had to press his hand against his chest to suppress the excitement in his heart. The loot drop this time was simply too amazing. It was definitely the most amazing loot he had ever seen. This included even the loot he had seen in his previous life. Setting all else aside, just the golden longsword sitting in his bag had very nearly made him faint from happiness. This weapon was one of God's Domain's 10 great legendary weapons as well as one of God's Domain's 36 famed swords. It was also the prototype of the weapon Voidbreaker and could cut all existences. Its name was the Light of Two Worlds, also known as the World-Breaking Gold. Chapter 2793 World Authority. The golden longsword covered in crimson divine runes sitting inside his bag was definitely the dream weapon of all swordsmen. So that's why the Light of Two Worlds was rumored to have been destroyed and no longer existed in God's domain in the past. Shifeng couldn't help his elation as he inspected the longsword in his bag. As it turns out, the weapon can't be obtained in the modern God's domain but only in the ancient God's domain. Light of Two Worlds. One-handed sword. Fragmented legendary rank. Equipment requirement. Strength 6000, tier attack power, 270% of strength. Attack speed 3% of agility. All attributes, increases according to the user's level. When equipped, attacks gain the mana annihilation effect, causing a spatial collapse in an area of 4 by 100 yards. Attacks have a 50% chance to deal 300% damage. Strength increased by 70%. Agility increased by 60%. Intelligence increased by 30%. Endurance increased by 60%. Attack speed increased by 40%. Ignore levels plus 50. All sword type skills effect increased by 40%. All sword type skills plus 1 level. Effective mana increased by 50%. Additional skill 1 spatial slash, tier 4 for 1 attack, increases strength by 200%, Power by 2 ranks up to Tier 5 advanced rank at maximum, and attack range to 1000 yards. Cooldown. 40 seconds additional skill 2 Golden Soul. Tier 4. Improves perception of magic elements by 200% and mana control by 300%. Reduces all concentration consumption by 70%. Duration. 1 minute cooldown. 6 hours additional skill 3 World Breaker. Tier 4. Consumes half of the user's concentration and mana to enhance the Light of 2 Worlds, granting the weapon the power to break worlds for 1 attack. Forcibly increases the power of attack by 1 tier. Up to Tier 5 advanced rank at maximum. Cooldown. 1 hour created by the ancient god of light. The Light of 2 Worlds possesses the power to cut all things. The divine power sources within the weapon have been destroyed by an inexplicable power. However, as the weapon itself is still intact, it is possible to fully repair it by injecting new divine power sources. Divine power source injected 0/2. Despite being the prototype of the Voidbreaker, the Light of 2 Worlds had still managed to rank number 1 among God's Domain's 36 famed swords. One could easily imagine how powerful the weapon was. Although the Light of 2 Worlds was currently incomplete, just the basic attributes it provided already made it far superior to even the Abyssal Blade. It undoubtedly had the highest attack power out of all the one-handed swords Shifeng had ever seen. Not to mention there were also the outrageous skills the weapon carried. Just by wielding the Light of 2 Worlds, a Tier 4 swordsman would be capable of exchanging one move with a Tier 5 existence. This was a feat that was impossible with ordinary fragmented legendary weapons. However, while the Light of 2 Worlds was incredibly powerful, its usage condition was also astonishingly high. Without the several fragmented legendary items on Shifeng, he wouldn't be able to equip the weapon. Meanwhile, the Light of 2 Worlds' appearance could also be considered heaven-sent. Now that Shifeng had reached level 140, both the Twilight Blade and Killing Ray could no longer keep up with his level. Hence, he had mainly been fighting with only the Abyssal Blade all this time, with the Twilight Blade and Killing Ray as support. However, now that he had the Light of 2 Worlds, he could arm both his main and sub-arms with adequate weapons. In fact, even if he failed to collect the 2 remaining fragments of Solomon's sword, he wouldn't have to worry about finding a replacement weapon. Moreover, even if he did manage to complete Solomon's sword, the complete Light of 2 Worlds wouldn't be the slightest bit inferior to it. The only problem was that divine power sources were incredibly hard to find. In fact, Shifeng had only ever heard rumors of divine power sources. He had never actually seen one before. This was because divine power sources were far more valuable than god crystals. They were the power sources of gods, and they carried incredible strength. The value of a divine power source was comparable to a legendary item. Meanwhile, the Light of 2 Worlds actually required 2 divine power sources. It seems I'll need to have the guild investigate divine power sources. Looking at the Light of 2 Worlds, Shifeng inwardly resolved to repair the weapon, no matter the cost. Legendary weapons were far too rare in God's domain. Now that one had appeared before him, it would be a huge waste if he did not try to repair it. Meanwhile, after seeing Shifeng had finished sorting through the loot, Lifeless Thorn and the others approached him with curious eyes. "Commander, did anything good drop this time?" Looking at Shifeng, Solitary 9 asked in a whisper, "Did a legendary item really drop?" They had just defeated an unrestrained Tier 4 infant dragon. If Shifeng said nothing good dropped, nobody would believe him. Solitary 9 was very curious to find out just how excellent the infant golden dragon's loot was. After all, there was still no news of any player obtaining a legendary item, so nobody could tell how powerful legendary items were. If a legendary item had truly appeared among the items dropped, they would have hit a huge jackpot. "Aren't you guys taking legendary items too lightly? There's no way a legendary item can drop from a monster." Shifeng smiled and shook his head when he saw the excited expressions of Solitary 9 and the others. He then said vaguely, however, "While there is no legendary item in the loot, there are several items whose value is comparable to legendary items. To me, at least, these items are almost as valuable as actual legendary items." He had no intention of telling everyone the specifics of the items dropped this time. This was because the loot was truly astonishing. Aside from the Light of 2 Worlds, there were 2 other items that could easily cause a sensation among God's domain's various powers. One of the 2 was a magic array design. Although the design only recorded a master magic array, this master magic array was more valuable than even some grandmaster magic arrays. This was because this magic array existed only in the ancient gods' domain, the 12-array magic world. This magic array could increase the density of all mana within its area of influence by 200% and players' mana perception by 100%. Although it only had two specific functions, if brought back to the modern gods' domain, it would definitely stand at the peak among all magic arrays in existence. As for the second item, it was a mysterious flame. Be it in the ancient gods' domain or modern gods' domain, mysterious flames were incredibly rare items, especially Tier 3 mysterious flames and above. A Tier 3 mysterious flame was just as rare as a fragmented legendary item. Meanwhile, the mysterious flame the infant golden dragon dropped was the Tier 4 mysterious flame Hellfire. A Tier 4 mysterious flame was something Shurfeng had only ever heard about in God's domain. According to rumor, after reaching Tier 4, mysterious flames would all possess astonishing power and a variety of incredible effects. Take the Soul Fire, for example. It was a mysterious flame capable of annihilating a player's soul, leaving the set player with no choice but to delete their accounts and restart from scratch. Such a feat was impossible for most Tier 5 existences. Moreover, even if a Tier 5 existence had the ability to wipe out a player's soul, it would only work on low-tier players. As players reached higher tiers, their souls would also grow stronger and become more resistant to destruction. After a certain point, even a Tier 6 god wielding the power to annihilate the immortal souls of players wouldn't be able to force the set player to delete their account. Nevertheless, the Tier 4 Soulfire could easily annihilate even the souls of Tier 3 players. Only after reaching Tier 4 would players become somewhat resistant to the Soulfire strength. This was also why the corrosive effect of the mysterious NPC's soul chain had weakened considerably after Shurfeng had reached Tier 4, allowing Shurfeng to live for much longer. Now he had obtained a complete Tier 4 mysterious flame. It was different from the incomplete Soulfire that he had gained through the mysterious NPC's soul beast. The other dropped items were similarly very precious. Out of the 100+ items dropped, over 30 were legendary materials such as dragon claws, dragon teeth, dragon scales, and dragon blood. There were also over a dozen master recipes and epic equipment forging designs. The rest were mainly inferior legendary materials and level 150 epic weapons and equipment. Two materials stood out among all that bounty, both inferior divine artifact ranked materials: the Dragon Eye and the Dragon Crystal. These were the quest items Angelica Teresa needed. Meanwhile, after hearing Shurfeng's words, Lifeless Thorn and Solitary 9 stopped asking questions. They understood that the items dropped this time were extraordinary and could not be revealed. Moreover, Shurfeng had already answered the main question plaguing their minds. There was no legendary item among the dropped items. Yuluo, you guys start resurrecting the others. We'll return to Meteorite City afterward, Shurfeng said to the team's healers as he looked at the dead Skyflare members' corpses scattered around the cavern. Once everyone was alive again, Shurfeng opened a spatial gate in the direction of Meteorite City. Thanks to the spatial gate, the return trip, which should have originally taken a dozen hours or so by flying ship, only took 4 hours, astonishing Skyflare's members. If not for the spatial gate's long cooldown and short duration, it would have definitely been considered a godly skill in God's domain. After returning to Meteorite City, Shurfeng completed all his transactions with Lionheart. Aside from the Crimson Dragon flying ship, Lionheart also purchased an additional 20 crystals of souls and 100 drops of soul water, which netted Shurfeng an additional 6 million magic crystals. Lionheart also used 3 million pieces of mana ore, which was treated as equivalent to 750,000 magic crystals, to exchange for another 5 crystals of souls. Although the mana ore's price had been slightly inflated, this was unavoidable, as purchasing mana ore in bulk was incredibly difficult. Purchasing too many would naturally raise the ore's market value. However, for Shurfeng, getting 3 million pieces of mana ore for the price of just 750,000 magic crystals was already a bargain. After the transactions with Lionheart, Shurfeng passed 30 crystals of souls and 1,000 drops of soul water to Yinya for her to conduct future transactions with the Skyflare Adventurer team. At the same time, he also tasked her with secretly purchasing some of God's domain's rare items. Finally, after settling all his business affairs, Feng handed the dragon eye and the dragon crystal to Angelica Teresa, who was still recuperating from her injuries. As soon as he handed over these two items, not only did Angelica's favorability of him increase by 100 points, but she also gave him a Tier 5 legacy guidance she had obtained from a sword saint. Feng was a little surprised by this reward. Is this the hidden reward for not bringing Angelica Teresa on the raid? While the infant golden dragon had indeed dropped a lot of excellent items, it hadn't dropped any legacy items. This situation had rendered Feng quite speechless at the time. Now, Angelica Teresa directly handed him the legacy guidance he wished for dearly. After the conversation with Angelica, Feng immediately received a system notification. System. Congratulations. You have completed the inferior mythical quest World's Choice. You have gained World Authority +2. System. You have obtained World Authority. World Authority currently at level 1. Please feel the specific effects of World Authority on your own. As soon as the system notification appeared, an indistinct chain became visible around Feng's body from the void. A moment later, this chain suddenly disintegrated, and he immediately felt the world around him becoming much clearer than before. He could even sense that his intimacy with the world of the ancient god's domain had improved slightly. The world was no longer as hostile toward him as before. So, these are the effects of World Authority? Feng was astonished when he sensed the changes to his body. His affinity with the magic elements was at least 50% better than before. His perception of his mana's operating principle had also improved significantly. After careful observation, he noticed that the layer of white mist that hindered his perception had thinned out by roughly 30%. With such a tremendous improvement, his chances of constructing a Tier 5 mana body would increase by at least 20%, at least 10 times more than what a legendary item could provide. Meteorite City Silver Hotel. After spending half a day experiencing the benefits of having World Authority, Feng decided to take a break. I've already made major strides in my mana control in merely half a day of experimenting. At this rate, my control over mana can probably reach the Advanced Master Standard in just half a month. Feng looked at the time in astonishment. Initially, he had estimated that he would take 3 or 4 months to reach the Advanced Master Standard for mana control. Now, he would need only half a month to accomplish this feat. The amount of time he could save with World Authority was astonishing. After reaching Tier 4, what was most important to players would no longer be weapons and equipment but their control over mana. The stronger a Tier 4 player's mana control was, the easier using skills and spells would be. They would also have an easier time constructing their Tier 5 mana body. From what he knew, one's mana control needed to be at the Advanced Master Standard at the very minimum to construct a Tier 5 mana body. In other words, so long as his mana control reached the Advanced Master Standard, he could begin attempting to construct a new mana body. Commander, it's almost time, Lifeless Thorn said as he entered the room. Okay. I finished all my business here already. We can go now. Feng nodded. Afterward, Feng, Lifeless Thorn and Solitary 9 went in secret to a forest several thousand yards away from Meteorite City, and met up with Luo, who had been waiting there for quite some time now. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You guild leader Black Flame, will we really be able to return? Luo couldn't help asking as she counted down the time. She had tried all sorts of methods to leave the ancient god's domain, yet none of them had succeeded. Although there was the system notification's assurance this time, she still felt a little doubtful. Relax. The system won't lie to us, Feng said, chuckling when he saw the anxious look on Luo's face. Shortly after Feng finished speaking, the system's timer of 1 natural day struck 0. Immediately, the space around the 4 shattered, forming 4 small space-time tiers. An invisible force then pushed them into these space-time tiers. In the blink of an eye, Feng's group of 4 disappeared from the quiet forest as if they never existed here in the first place. Chapter 2794 God's Domain State of Affairs. This place was a vast, blue ocean with nary a cloud in the sky. At this time, a Terran space spanning over 1,000 yards suddenly appeared above the ocean, its appearance kicking up strong winds that disrupted the peace of this place. A moment after the spatial tear formed, 4 figures flew out of it and plopped into the ocean. Their impact on the water generated waves dozens of meters tall, the commotion attracting the attention of the dozen or so ships sailing nearby. The mana here is so thin. The sense of rejection is gone. I think we're back. While standing on the ocean's surface, Lifeless Thorn, Solitary 9, and Uluo grew excited when they sensed the familiar low mana environment and the lack of rejection from the world. Although the ancient gods domain had plenty of benefits that the modern gods domain did not possess, they had played in the modern gods domain for most of their career in gods domain. Most of the people and matters they knew of were found here. Naturally, they were glad to return to the modern gods domain. Meanwhile, the appearance of Shi Feng's group also gave the players on the nearby ships a huge shock. Crap! Who are they? How can they stand on water? They should be using some kind of levitating skill. No. If they were using a skill or spell, there should be strong mana fluctuations. But I don't sense any coming from the four of them. At this moment, Shi Feng's group of four had all their information concealed with their black cloaks, so the surrounding players couldn't uncover any information about them. The only thing the surrounding players were certain of was that the four were all players. Knowing this, the surrounding players couldn't help wanting to find out the identity of Shi Feng's group. Let's hurry up and leave, a level 123 Tier 3 ranger driving an advanced speedboat said. The situation in this sea zone has been chaotic recently. We'll be doomed if we get dragged into the war between adventurer teams on Dragonheart Island. Indeed. Let's leave this place quickly. Now that such a huge commotion has occurred here, War Bloods members will definitely come over. If they find us here, they might take us for members of other adventurer teams and kill us, the level 122 shield warrior standing beside the ranger youth said, nodding in agreement. While the players on this advanced speedboat were conversing with each other, Shi Feng and his companions, around 100 yards away, heard every word of their conversation. So, this place is near Dragonheart Island. Shi Feng revealed a faint smile. It seems we were lucky. We didn't get teleported to some dangerous and remote location. Space-time teleportation was incredibly random. If they got teleported into a dangerous location, such as a forbidden land or a special location that prevented teleportation, making their way home would be very troublesome. Nodding, Lifeless Thorn said, but based on these people's words, there seems to be quite a struggle occurring on Dragonheart Island. That's normal. With the NPC population growing continuously, the number of NPCs operating at sea would naturally increase. While they might not be as numerous as the landlocked NPCs, they will still outnumber players by a large margin. And with the participation of NPCs, the various powers will definitely struggle even more desperately among themselves for resources, Shi Feng said, unsurprised by Dragonheart Island's current state of affairs. This was because he had received some news from Liangjing a few days ago. According to her, God's domain was truly messed up right now, and NPC forces had even begun taking action against the guild towns of players. Although the NPC forces did not directly assault guild towns, they still created a lot of trouble inside the guild towns. They forced the guilds running these towns to submit to them and pay a ton of resources and coins in tribute. Otherwise, they would continue their harassment until the guild town imploded. In Shi Feng's previous life, many unrated guilds and third-rate guilds had no choice but to submit to these NPC forces' extortion. After all, if these guilds lacked the income from their guild towns, they would truly be doomed. Now that God's Domain's first major update had arrived ahead of schedule, once the NPCs began taking action with full force, even first-rate guilds and superpowers would have no choice but to pay tribute to the NPC forces to buy time to develop themselves. After all, in God's Domain, players were merely a minority. One could also say that players were outsiders. Apart from immortality, players did not have any advantages over the original inhabitants of God's Domain. God's Domain's inhabitants far outnumbered players when it came to the top combatants both sides possessed. This would remain true even 10 years after God's Domain's launch. Upon hearing Shi Feng's words, a hint of anxiety appeared on Uluo's face. Immediately, she took to the skies and flew toward the nearby advanced speedboat, her approach giving the 6 players on the boat a fright. These 6 players stared at Uluo with horrified expressions. Their reaction was because the ability to fly freely in the sky was unique to players at Tier 4 or above. Tier 4 players were existences that even NPCs feared. Although there were only a small number of Tier 4 experts in God's Domain, Every one of them was a big shot capable of shaking heaven and earth with their every move. These Tier 4 experts were not existence's ordinary Tier 3 experts like themselves could meet. "How may I help you, miss?" The Tier 3 ranger serving as the leader of the party asked respectfully as he looked up at Uluo. The strong were respected in God's domain. This fact might not have been evident in the past. However, after experiencing the changes brought by the system's major update and the various NPCs' arrogant behavior, these players thoroughly understood that the world of God's domain was a much more straightforward and crueler place than the real world. When it came to dealing with Tier 4 powerhouses, if they offended the other party, it wouldn't be strange for them to get annihilated the next second. They also wouldn't be able to do anything about it. "Do you know Heaven's Blade's situation?" Uluo asked. Heaven's Blade was her home. Its well-being had also been a concern for her all this time. Before she entered the ancient god's domain, the competition on Dragonheart Island had already been incredibly intense. Heaven's Blade had even clashed with several of the island's top adventurer teams and suffered casualties numbering in the thousands. This was why she had risked grinding and exploring a dangerous location by herself. Since her disappearance from the modern god's domain until now, a month had gone by. Meanwhile, 1 month was more than enough for the entirety of God's domain to undergo significant changes, let alone a small place like Dragonheart Island. Heaven's Blade. The ranger youth was surprised and confused by Uluo's question. "What? Have you never heard of Heaven's Blade before?" Uluo frowned. "Or do you not want to say it?" As Uluo's voice chilled, the Tier 3 shield warrior and the others shuddered involuntarily and looked toward the ranger youth. They didn't know whether they should speak up. Although Uluo hadn't revealed any killing intent thus far, her aura alone was already more than enough to instill fear in them. After all, they had personally witnessed just how powerful a Tier 4 player could be. A Tier 4 player could kill hundreds of Tier 3 players with just the flip of a hand. The silence had stretched out for a second when the ranger youth wiped away the cold sweat on his forehead and said hurriedly, "Miss, you misunderstand me. It's not that I refused to tell you. It's just that this matter is already common knowledge in God's domain. I was just wondering why you would ask such a question, miss." Common knowledge in God's domain? Uluo couldn't help feeling a little confused. According to Shurfeng, before his group entered the ancient god's domain, nothing big had happened to Heaven's Blade. It had simply been competing with Dragonheart Island's several top adventurer teams for resources as usual. Shurfeng had left the modern god's domain only a few days ago. Logically, nothing significant should have happened to Heaven's Blade. That's right. This incident caused quite the commotion back then. It affected over a dozen superpowers, the ranger said, nodding. 3 days ago, through some unknown means, not only did Warblood enter into an alliance with one of Dragonheart Island's local NPC forces, but someone from Warblood also got promoted to Tier 4. As a result, Warblood's influence on the island skyrocketed, and even 13 thrones suffered losses at the hands of Warblood. What about Heaven's Blade? Uluo asked. Heaven's Blade. The ranger hesitated to answer because he knew that the Tier 4 powerhouse before him was definitely related to Heaven's Blade. After taking a deep breath, he continued, Heaven's Blade disbanded 2 days ago. Disbanded? Uluo was stunned. How is this possible? She had developed from the ground up together with Heaven's Blade, and the adventurer team was basically her home. Yet now she was being told that Heaven's Blade had disbanded? At this moment, let alone Uluo, even Shurfeng was stunned when he overheard the ranger's words from a distance. Heaven's Blade was one of Dragonheart Island's top 5 adventurer teams. Not only did the adventurer team boast close to 10 peak experts under its command, but its commander Zwei was even one of Dragonheart Island's top 3 MTs. In the past, Zwei had also been a legendary figure, and she had developed Heaven's Blade into an overlord-like existence in God's domain. Hence, hearing that Heaven's Blade had actually disbanded now came as a shock to him. If Heaven's Blade disbanded, where did Heaven's Blade's executives go? Suppressing the emotions in her heart and doing her best to stay calm, Uluo asked in a quivering voice, where did Commander Zwei and the others? Shaking his head, the ranger replied, This I do not know. I only know that Heaven's Blade seems to have enraged Warblood. Warblood is still hunting down Heaven's Blade's members even now, going as far as sealing off Dragonheart Island. People on Dragonheart Island can't contact the outside world. Even those seeking to leave Dragonheart Island need to go through Warblood's inspection. If I were to guess, Heaven's Blade's executives have probably left Dragonheart Island and already gone somewhere else to develop. I understand. You may go now. Yuluo could no longer remain calm after listening to the ranger's words. After waving her hand at the party of 6, indicating that they were free to continue with their business, she turned around and flew back to Shifeng's group. After hearing Yuluo's words, the party of 6 felt like death row prisoners who had just been granted amnesty. Hurriedly, they sailed away from the area on their advanced speedboat, not daring to remain for even a moment longer lest Yuluo change her mind and vent her anger on them. Yuluo, what do you plan to do now? Shifeng asked as he took in Yuluo's downcast expression. According to their original plan, they would go their separate ways after returning to the modern era. However, it turned out that Heaven's Blade had disbanded, and Yuluo probably couldn't save Heaven's Blade by herself. Me? Shifeng's question left Yuluo at a loss. I don't know. The modern god's domain she was familiar with no longer existed, so she didn't know what she should do. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Since that's the case, why don't we go take a look at Dragonheart Island for now? Shifeng suggested. I still have some matters to deal with on Dragonheart Island. Meanwhile, although Heaven's Blade has disbanded, I believe Commanders Vi and Heaven's Blade's other executives wouldn't leave the island so easily. After all, their foundation and all their resources are on Dragonheart Island. It would be difficult for them to decide to change their base of operations within a short period. So, once we reach Dragonheart Island, you might be able to contact them. Yuluo's eyes immediately glowed at Shifeng's words. She felt that what he said was indeed true. Heaven's Blade's members had been residing on Dragonheart Island for such a long time now. How could they possibly just pack up and leave? Not to mention, even if Heaven's Blade was no more, she could still contact Commanders Vi and the others. After all, unlike the ancient god's domain, long-range communication between players was possible in the modern god's domain. Okay. I'll follow you, Guild Leader Black Flame. Yuluo nodded. Afterward, Shifeng opened a spatial gate and teleported toward Dragonheart Island. Chapter 2795 Dragonheart Island's Chaos. The waters surrounding Dragonheart Island. Over 1,000 ships were currently scattered around the islands surrounding Dragonheart Island, all bearing the mark of the Warblood Adventurer team. Any ship traveling to Dragonheart Island had to submit to Warblood's inspection. In addition, as Dragonheart Island was enveloped by a sealing magic array, communication between the island and the outside world was impossible. Teleportation into and out of the island was also blocked. At this time, Dragonheart Island was practically Warblood's territory. Damn it. Warblood is too vicious. We clearly aren't Heaven's Blade's members. Yet they charged us 3 magic crystals and 20 ancient bronze just for leaving Dragonheart Island. A level 114, Tier 2 berserker driving a speedboat cursed angrily as he watched the departing speedboat belonging to Warblood. Shoo! Keep your voice down. They still haven't gone far. A level 120, Tier 3 elementalist on the same speedboat hurriedly covered the angry berserker's mouth. He then warned, Warblood has the final say on everything on Dragonheart Island right now. Even the superpowers have no choice but to go along with Warblood's whims. We are leaving Dragonheart Island to sell our haul this time. We'll be finished if we get targeted. I wonder what Heaven's Blade did to anger Warblood to such an extent? Even now, Warblood is still hunting for Heaven's Blade's members. The captured members are even sent to be imprisoned by NPCs. A level 117, Tier 2 Oracle mused when she saw that Warblood's speedboat was already more than 300 yards away. Isn't that obvious? Warblood's clearly trying to get Heaven's Blade's lands near the World Tower. The Berserker said indifferently. They are discovering more and more treasures in the World Tower's underground floors right now. The 4th underground floor is especially amazing. However, the abnormal energy in the 4th floor is overwhelming, and the food needed to recover from this energy is incredibly expensive and uneconomical. The only other way to recover quickly is to rest in the special region around the World Tower. Meanwhile, Heaven's Blade owns a total of 5 plots of land in that special region, including the sole large-sized plot in the special zone and a medium-sized plot. Warblood is currently in a frenzy to expand its influence, so how can it possibly let such a fat piece of meat get away? Indeed, the lands around the World Tower are in high demand right now. Since Warblood has already forced Heaven's Blade to disband, it naturally won't let go of Heaven's Blade's lands. The reason Warblood is capturing Heaven's Blade's members is simply to force Heaven's Blade's commander to submit and give up those lands, the Elementalist youth said, nodding. However, I doubt Heaven's Blade will give up so easily. After all, so long as Heaven's Blade has those 5 plots of land, it can make a comeback any time. When the players aboard the speedboat spoke of the World Tower, they couldn't help a sense of yearning for it. Before the players on Dragonheart Island began exploring the World Tower's 4th underground floor, they hadn't placed much importance on the lands around the World Tower. After all, those lands were absurdly expensive. Moreover, they were far from Dragonheart Island's business district. Naturally, nobody had been willing to purchase them. However, after players began exploring the 4th underground floor, they found that it actually housed Tier 4 legacy lands. As a result, the 4th underground floor was now a bone of contention for all superpowers in God's domain. Unfortunately, there were only 34 plots of land around the World Tower, which weren't even enough to divide among the local player forces, let alone the foreign superpowers. Moreover, it turned out that not only did Heaven's Blade own 5 plots of land in that special zone, but the adventurer team had even gotten its hands on the best one. How could this not make the various superpowers in Warblood go crazy? Before the party of 6 could continue their conversation, a loud explosion suddenly sounded in the distance. Immediately, the party of 6, together with the other players in the vicinity, turned to look toward the origin of the explosion. The next moment, what entered everyone's eyes was a group of around 30 cloaked players summoning 2 flying mounts. The 2 Tier 3 peak experts leading the team worked together, and rapidly finished off 20 Tier 3 Warblood experts. Afterward, they each hopped onto a flying mount and broke through Warblood's encirclement together with their team. It's Heaven's Blade's remnants. Activate the magic array. Don't let them escape. When the nearby Warblood members saw this scene, they promptly sprang into action. Suddenly, the several dozen Warblood speedboats positioned around the 2 flying mounts set up a sealing barrier. It was evident that Warblood's members were prepared for Heaven's Blade's members. The next moment, before the 2 flying mounts could ascend 200 yards into the air, they were trapped within a magic barrier covering over 1,000 yards. The translucent barrier had visible runes decorating it. One could easily tell that it was an advanced magic array at a glance. If trapped by this barrier, even Tier 4 mythic monsters would need a lot of time to break out of it, let alone Tier 3 players. Damn it, the female Guardian Knight leading Heaven's Blade's team cursed when she saw the barrier, a trace of frustration appearing in her eyes. She then turned to the man standing at the front of the other flying mount and asked, Vice Commander Shadow, what should we do? It'll take us at least 3 minutes to break out of this barrier. That's more than enough time for Warblood's members to surround us. At the Guardian Knight's words, the man named Divine Shadow standing atop the flying serpent frowned. It was clear that he hadn't expected Warblood to use such a powerful move against them. We have no choice but to fight. I'll activate my Berserk skill and distract them afterward. In the meantime, you guys figure out a way to escape this place, Divine Shadow said as he looked at Warblood's approaching experts. He then turned to the female knight Cleansing Flame and added, remember, do everything you can to leave, even if it means escaping by yourself. Only if you escape will Heaven's Blade have hope. Yes, sir, Cleansing Flame answered, a solemn expression appearing on her face. Now that Heaven's Blade had already disbanded and Warblood was even hunting down Heaven's Blade's members on Dragonheart Island, Heaven's Blade's only hope of making a comeback was to seek help from the outside world. With the deeds of the Special Zone's lands in her hands, it was entirely possible to recruit the help of a super guild if they paid a certain price. However, before Cleansing Flame could control her flying serpent to head for the barrier's edge, a powerful voice echoed in the ears of Heaven's Blade's members. Escape? Do you think it's that easy? None of you should think of leaving today. Before Divine Shadow and Cleansing Flame could react to the situation, a man suddenly appeared in front of them. This crimson-eyed man wore a dark red robe and held a crimson wooden staff. His entire being also gave off an indescribably evil feeling. Just by hovering in the air, This evil-looking man exerted a powerful pressure on Heaven's Blade's members. Divine Shadow and the others felt as if a mountain were weighing down their bodies. They could also feel the mana surrounding them growing hostile. Autumn Plant. A hint of confusion appeared in Divine Shadow's eyes when he saw the crimson-robed man. Impossible. Shouldn't you be leading a team to the 4th floor? The evil man blocking their team was none other than Autumn Plant, one of Warblood's 4 great vice-commanders, as well as Warblood's sole Tier 4 member. As a great wizard, he was in existence capable of destroying half of a small island with one attack. Previously, Autumn Plant had even single-handedly wiped out tens of thousands of 13 Thrones' experts, using a single Tier 4 large-scale destruction spell. Over 20 of the casualties were Void Realm experts, and 3 were Domain Realm experts. As a result of this severe loss, 13 Thrones had no choice but to back off from competing with Warblood. After this battle, Autumn Plant had also been crowned the undisputed #1 player on Dragonheart Island. Meanwhile, it was because they had caught wind that Autumn Plant had left for the World Tower's 4th underground floor that they had attempted to escape Dragonheart Island. Yet now, ha ha ha, if I didn't visit the 4th floor, would you remnants be willing to come out? Autumn Plant sneered contemptuously as he looked down on Divine Autumn and the others. You tricked us. Divine Shadow clenched his fists in anger. He never thought that he would fall for Autumn Plant's trap. We've always been rivals in the past. Now that you've gotten promoted to Tier 4, I want to see just how strong you've become. After saying so, Divine Shadow activated his Berserk skill, his aura skyrocketing to the point of rivaling Tier 4 mythic monsters. At this time, if comparing purely in terms of aura, Divine Shadow was not the slightest bit inferior to Autumn Plant. Fool! When Autumn Plant sensed the intensity of Divine Shadow's aura skyrocketing, his scion remained unchanged. Instead, he merely waved his hand. Before Divine Shadow could react, over a dozen crimson chains appeared out of thin air and bound his body. And despite struggling with all his might, he couldn't break free from their restraint no matter what. On the contrary, his resistance weakened as time passed. How is this possible? Cleansing Flame was stunned. Divine Shadow was one of Heaven's Blade's few Domain Realm experts. With his Berserk skill activated logically, he should be able to put up a good fight against a Tier 4 player. Yet, Divine Shadow was captured instantly. Autumn Plant had thoroughly shattered their understanding of Tier 4 existences. You people don't know just how massive the gap between Tier 3 and Tier 4 classes is. Do you really think you can turn things around when going up against me? Looking at Cleansing Flame's stunned expression, Autumn Plant sneered. Let alone one Domain Realm expert. Even 10 Domain Realm experts working together won't last more than 3 moves against me. Realizing the difference between them, Divine Shadow turned to Cleansing Flame and the others and shouted, Damn it! Damn it! Everyone kill yourselves! Don't let him capture you. Don't even think you can kill yourselves so easily. Autumn Plant said, brandishing his staff. The next moment, blood-red chains appeared from the void and bound Cleansing Flame and the others, preventing them from moving their bodies at all. The difference between the two sides was clear for all to see. How can a Tier 4 class be so powerful? Divine Shadow and the others stared at Autumn Plant with disbelief. They had seen Shurfeng's battle video during the reserve seat competition at the War God's Temple. In their opinion, although Tier 4 players were powerful, they were not an insurmountable opponent. However, they actually couldn't offer even the slightest resistance to Autumn Plant. The strength Autumn Plant displayed far surpassed Shurfeng's. While Heaven's Blade's members were shocked by the massive gap in strength between them and Autumn Plant, Warblood's other members caught up with them and secured them. Alright, take them to the NPCs. Looking at Divine Shadow and the other remnants of Heaven's Blade, Autumn Plant smiled and said, Now that we've caught 2 big fish, I refuse to believe that Zwei won't submit. It's over. It's over. Everything's over this time. Divine Shadow fell into despair when he saw Heaven's Blade's captured members. I've truly doomed you guys this time. The only reason why they had decided to take on such a risky operation this time was the misinformation he had believed. Now, everyone was doomed because of his foolishness. After all, if players were imprisoned by NPCs, nothing would change even if they forcibly logged out of the game. They would still reappear in prison after they logged back into the game. Unless they could break out, they would have to spend at least 15 days in prison. A 15-day gap was more than enough for everyone to fall far behind God's domain's frontline players. However, as Divine Shadow was falling into a pit of despair and self-reproach, a horned eagle carrying 4 people suddenly came flying over from a distance. To everyone's surprise, the horned eagle actually sported Heaven's Blade's flag extremely conspicuously. More remnants of Heaven's Blade? Seeing as they have a horned eagle, it seems another big fish has arrived. Autumnplant's lips curled up in delight when he saw the horned eagle. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Meanwhile, this unexpected situation also confused Divine Shadow and the others. They couldn't understand why one of Heaven's Blade's horned eagles would be flying to them from outside Dragonheart Island. However, when they recalled Autumnplant's capabilities, they immediately began shouting at the people riding the horned eagle to escape. Although Tier 4 players could fly, their flying speed wasn't comparable to flying mounts. Hence, it was still possible to escape if the horned eagle flew at full speed. Escape? Do you think that's possible? After saying so, Autumnplant used instantaneous movement and rapidly approached the horned eagle. A Tier 4 Great Wizard's instantaneous movement had a range of 3,000 yards, many times superior to a Tier 3 Great Mage's instantaneous movement. Chapter 2796 Black Flame's astonishing appearance. When Divine Shadow and the other Heaven's Blades members saw Autumnplant teleporting away, their eyes turned bloodshot, and they desperately tried to stop him. Unfortunately, none of them managed to break free of their restraints, and they could only watch helplessly as the scene before them continued playing out. Damn it! At this moment, Divine Shadow couldn't help wondering why Autumnplant had managed to get promoted to Tier 4. In terms of combat standards, Autumnplant couldn't even rank within Dragonheart Island's top 20. The only advantage he had was his race as a half-elf, which granted him a slightly better affinity with mana. However, the promotion quest of half-elves was also much harder than that of humans. For the sake of balance, races with strong talents in God's domain would often find their talents becoming shackles that prevented them from advancing. Hence, not many players were willing to convert to other races. Only those with incredible willpower would take this risky path. As proof of the limitation of other races, Autumnplant had gotten promoted to Tier 3 slightly later than players of similar levels and combat standards. Yet, he was actually the first to reach Tier 4 on Dragonheart Island. This situation was simply unbelievable, no matter how Divine Shadow looked at it. In reality, though, Autumnplant's promotion to Tier 4 was a complete accident. It wasn't something he had actively sought to accomplish. Instead, his promotion was related to the legacy of his hidden class. Vice Commander, we don't have many horned eagles. Aside from the 2 of the other Vice Commanders remaining on Dragonheart Island, the only other horned eagle I can think of belongs to the missing team leader, Luo. Cleansing Flame said worriedly as she looked at the approaching horned eagle. Could that person flying toward us be team leader Luo? It should be, but it's useless to say anything now, Divine Shadow said, smiling helplessly. If we can't do anything against Autumnplant, what more can Luo do? At this time, he no longer held any hopes of Luo escaping. It might have been a different story if Luo were a scout class, but as a cleric, she wouldn't notice Autumnplant's rapid approach before it was too late. That's right. Now that Autumn has taken action, they can't escape. You should just obediently follow us back and persuade your commander. At this time, a blue-clad woman suddenly appeared beside Divine Shadow and the others, giving Cleansing Flame and the others a scare. This female ranger was none other than Inkfeather, another one of Warblood's 4 great vice commanders. I never thought that Warblood would send 2 of its vice commanders just to stop us. What an honor, Divine Shadow said provocatively as he looked at Inkfeather. Shadow, there's no point in inciting me. Sneering, Inkfeather said, even without Autumn here, do you think you can escape me? You should know very well that if we were to fight, I would have a greater chance of winning. Not to mention, I am more proficient at hunting down targets. At Inkfeather's words, Divine Feather stopped speaking as a domain realm expert himself. He had to admit that Inkfeather was powerful. Previously, he could still beat her when she had yet to reach the domain realm. At present, however, not only was Inkfeather in the domain realm already, but it was even rumored that she had obtained a fragmented legendary bow. Her strength was incredibly close to catching up with Tier 4 existences. Hence, in an actual confrontation, the chances that he would lose were indeed very high. You don't have to worry. Yuluo won't be in any pain. Looking at Divine Shadow and the others, Inkfeather smiled faintly and added, she'll soon be like you. Once within Autumn's sight, nobody can escape. Afterward, Inkfeather and the other War Blood members shifted their gaze toward Autumn Plant, who had already popped up before the Horned Eagle. Upon noticing Autumn Plant, the flying Horned Eagle felt uneasy and came to an abrupt stop, looking at the Tier 4 Great Wizard with fear in its eyes. I don't know whether to call you bunch brave or stupid to approach while riding one of Heaven's Blade's horned eagles, Autumn Plant said, smiling as he looked at the 4 cloaked figures atop the flying mount. At this time, only 3 people in Heaven's Blade possess a horned eagle. Of the 3, 2 are still hiding inside Dragonheart Island. Even if you don't reveal yourselves, I can guess that one of you is that missing team leader, Yuluo, right? Warblood had conducted a detailed investigation into Heaven's Blade's organizational structure, after forcing the latter to disband. The sudden disappearance of Yuluo was included in the information they dug 6 up. Yuluo did not bother refuting Autumn Plant's words. She simply looked at the Great Wizard and said calmly, I never thought you would actually be the first on Dragonheart Island to get promoted to Tier 4. That's right. But many more unexpected things have occurred as well, such as the dissolution of Heaven's Blade and the fact that you're now a prisoner of War Blood. Autumn Plant said contemptuously instead of growing enraged at Yuluo's words. Now do you want me to take action, or are you going to follow me obediently? However, no sooner had Autumn Plant finished speaking than a chuckle came from behind Yuluo. Long time no see, Vice Commander Autumn. It seems you've grown to have quite the arrogant tone. As this voice spread, Autumn Plant's complexion changed, and he stared automatically at the cloaked man standing behind Yuluo. You are. For a moment Autumn Plant doubted his ears. After all, he was familiar with this voice, to the point where just hearing it disgusted him already. In fact, he even had trouble speaking right now. Black Flame. Autumn Plant's reaction was because this man was the culprit responsible for Warblood's loss of reputation on Dragonheart Island. This man had also very nearly turned Warblood into a joke to the various superpowers. Hence, this man was the person Blood Oath, Warblood's commander, wished to kill the most. That's right. Nodding, Shurfeng removed his hood and smiled at Autumn Plant. We meet again, Vice Commander Autumn. The instant Shurfeng removed his hood, a wave of restlessness spread through the War Blood members spectating the situation from a distance. Heaven's Blade's members were similarly astonished to see Shurfeng. Black Flame was currently a big shot that everybody in God's domain knew of. He had thoroughly risen to fame during the reserve seat competition as the first player in God's domain to reach Tier 4. Although there hadn't been any news of him recently, his performance during the competition was still being discussed by countless players even today. This is great. It's really Guild Leader Black Flame. Cleansing Flame grew ecstatic when she saw Shurfeng. Although Heaven's Blade wasn't considered allies with Zero Wing, the organizations had a relatively good relationship. In fact, Zero Wing was one of the guilds they intended to seek help from when they were planning to escape from Dragonheart Island. The arrival of Zero Wing's guild leader was undoubtedly a wonderful situation for Heaven's Blade. Moreover, Shurfeng was a Tier 4 player. Even Autumn Plant shouldn't dare act recklessly before him. However, as Cleansing Flame and the others were rejoicing, Inkfeather sneered at them. Don't celebrate too soon. Black Flame's appearance here is just perfect. Looking at Shurfeng's distant figure, Inkfeather smiled faintly. He turned Warblood into everyone's laughingstock previously. Now we'll let him know that he won't get off scot-free for interfering in Warblood's matters. After saying so, Inkfeather shot a dazzling arrow into the sky, which was visible even from 10,000 yards away. Immediately afterward, the Warblood members patrolling on speedboats in the vicinity each took out a stone with strange runes engraved on it. They then began frenziedly pumping their mana into the stone. Suddenly, a storm brewed, blanketing the entire sea zone. Simultaneously, multiple barriers emerged from the ocean, thoroughly enveloping Shurfeng's group of 4. An endless supply of water-type mana also bound them, the restriction weakening their basic attributes and physique by 30%. What a powerful restriction! Shurfeng was a little surprised by this situation. There were very few magic arrays capable of affecting Tier 4 players significantly. Even a Master Magic Array would only be capable of reducing a Tier 4 player's basic attributes. It would hardly affect a Tier 4 player's physique. Nevertheless, the magic array used on them had reduced both their basic attributes and physique by a significant margin. This was truly an amazing magic array. Ha ha ha! Black Flame, you've really barged your way into hell now. Autumn Plant burst into delighted laughter when he saw that the magic barrier had taken effect. We originally intended this sea prison to be a present for Heaven's Blade Zwei. Now though we're giving it to you. What do you think? Under normal circumstances, Autumn Plant would still have to be afraid of Shifeng. After all, Shifeng was the first player to reach Tier 4. Hence, Shifeng's understanding of Tier 4 classes should greatly surpass his own. There was also the fact that the moves Autumn Plant had employed against Tier 3 players would have hardly any effect on Tier 4 players. However, the situation was different now. The Sea Prison was a magic array capable of suppressing even Tier 4 existences significantly. While a 30% reduction of basic attributes couldn't be considered significant, a 30% reduction of physique was massive. Such a suppression would basically reduce a Tier 4 physique to the Tier 3 standard. With such a huge difference in physique, even if Shifeng possessed astonishing basic attributes, he wouldn't be a match for Autumn Plant. This sea prison is not bad, but you wasted it for nothing. After observing the runes on the barrier, Shifeng found that this ancient magic array's current performance could only be considered half-baked at best. At the very least, it needed over a dozen master magicians to exhibit its capabilities fully. What arrogance! Upon seeing Shifeng's nonchalant behavior, Autumn Plant brandished his staff. Death is already knocking on your door. I want to see just how long you can keep up your facade. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. After saying so, Autumn Plant summoned several dozen crimson chains that shot at Shifeng. Tier 4 legacy spell, Bloodbound Lock. However, just as the crimson chains were about to reach Shifeng, a ripple of mana came from his body and stopped all of the chains cold 1 meter away from him. Afterward, a voice entered Autumn Plant's ears. This binding spell is pretty good. Unfortunately, you used it on the wrong person. Chapter 2797. Splitting the Sea. As soon as Shifeng finished speaking, the War Blood members spectating from a distance couldn't help gaping in shock at the scene playing out before them, their minds refusing to accept this was true. Even Heaven's Blades members felt as if they were dreaming when they saw this scene, having personally experienced the power of those crimson chains. Those chains carried immense power. Even a mythic monster should be incapable of struggling free of them. Moreover, evading those chains was also impossible. Nevertheless, the crimson chains Autumn Plant summoned actually failed to get within 1 meter of Shifeng. Moreover, they hadn't seen Shifeng make any movements. From their perspective, the chains seemed to be afraid of Shifeng and did not dare move closer to him. Impossible. This is absolutely impossible. Autumn Plant was dumbfounded as he looked at the scene before him. In fact, compared to the surrounding spectators, he was even more confused by this situation. After all, as the summoner of these chains, he knew that he had not held back in the slightest. There's no way he can stop a Tier 4 spell without using any skill or spell of his own. This is absolutely impossible. Glaring at Shifeng, Autumn Plant demanded, "What did you do?" Had Shifeng used a skill or spell to stop his spell, Autumn Plant would have found this situation reasonable. However, Shifeng clearly did not do anything. The man simply unleashed his mana to the surroundings, yet that actually rendered the chains summoned by Bloodbound Lock incapable of getting close to him. At this moment, let alone Autumn Plant, even Luo Lifeless Thorn, and Solitary 9 were surprised by this situation. They knew that Shifeng was incredibly strong. After all, he had very nearly killed Lionheart in one move. However, they never thought that he could actually stop a Tier 4 binding spell just by unleashing his mana. This situation had thoroughly shattered their understanding of Shifeng. Can't you see it very clearly? Looking at Autumn Plant's horrified expression, Shifeng said calmly, "As a Tier 4 Great Wizard, you should be well aware that a spell's performance is dependent on the difference between the quality of the spell's mana and that of the target's mana. Do you think a fragile rope can restrain an elephant?" After obtaining level 1 World Authority, aside from a slight improvement in his affinity with and control of mana, He had also gained a significant boost in his understanding of the operating principles of mana. Hence, he was now capable of condensing mana of much higher quality and in much greater quantity. Now, the mana he could conjure was at least 50% stronger than what he could with just a 110% completion rate mana body. Thanks to this improvement, all mana that entered his mana domain was subject to his control. Autumn Plant's attempt to bind him with a Tier 4 binding spell that hadn't even reached a 100% completion rate was a complete and utter joke. Rather than relying on such a spell, Autumn Plant would be more effective if he tried to attack Shurfeng with his staff. What do you mean? Shurfeng's words confused Autumn Plant. A spell's performance was indeed dependent on the quality of its mana and of its target's mana. However, he was currently a Tier 4 Great Wizard. The spell he used was also at the Tier 4 standard. How could his spell not have any effect against a player of the same tier? What do I mean? Shurfeng shook his head in disappointment. He had already given Autumn Plant a clear explanation, yet the latter still failed to understand the cause of his failure. All right then. I'll just let you feel it yourself. As soon as Shurfeng finished speaking, a ripple of mana spread out from his body. The space within a 1,000-yard radius of Shurfeng darkened. When looking at this darkened region from a distance, one would even see space within this region warping. Caught within Shurfeng's mana domain, Autumn Plant suddenly felt his mind turning sluggish. He also felt as if his body had fallen into a mire, as the ambient mana had undergone a complete change. At this point, the mana around him couldn't even be considered mana. Unlike normal mana, this mana felt dark, murky, and silent. Surrounded by this mana, Autumn Plant very nearly retched in disgust, his complexion turning incomparably pale. No, this is impossible. How can you have such mana? When Autumn Plant looked at Shurfeng now, his eyes were filled with fear and madness. He simply couldn't fathom how there could be such a person in this world. Meanwhile, upon seeing Autumn Plant rambling on like a lunatic while looking at Shurfeng, Inkfeather immediately contacted him. Autumn, what happened on your side? Inkfeather stared at Autumn Plant's crazed behavior in confusion. Do you need our help? Autumn Plant had clearly been normal just a second ago. However, as soon as the dark space appeared, he began behaving abnormally. No, run. Run quickly. Autumn Plant urged frantically when he received Inkfeather's call. He's not human. He's not human at all. Not human? What do you mean? Inkfeather grew even more confused at Autumn Plant's words. His mana is too terrifying. We are absolutely no match for him. Autumn Plant exclaimed with a horrified expression. You need to escape quickly. Immediately notify the commander and have him contact Secret Hand. Only Secret Hand can go up against him. Notify Secret Hand? Is there a need to go that far? At this point, Inkfeather suspected that something was wrong with Autumn Plant's mental state. Their opponent was only a Tier 4 Sword Emperor. Even if Shurfeng was indeed the first player to reach Tier 4, there shouldn't be any need to seek help from the Secret Hand Association, the largest NPC force based on Dragonheart Island. After all, Warblood still had plenty of trump cards in reserve. Even if they couldn't get rid of Shurfeng shouldn't think of breaking out of the sea prison. Hostile players caught inside the sea prison would have their stamina and concentration drained rapidly. Even a Tier 4 player wouldn't last more than 10 minutes within it. And if a player's stamina and concentration zeroed out, they wouldn't be able to move their body at all. They might even die outright. Hence, even if their team was no match for Shurfeng in a frontal confrontation, they could still whittle him to death inside the sea prison. When Inkfeather showed no intention of listening to his words, Autumn Plant felt like he was about to go crazy. No. Listen to me. You don't know just how P-11 before Autumn Plant could say anything more. Shurfeng finally took action. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu the swordsman unsheathed the abyssal blade, raised the magic weapon slightly, and executed a vertical slash at the space in front of him. First sword Light Shadow. Suddenly, an illusory greatsword several hundred meters long appeared in the sky and fell toward Autumn Plant, leaving a dark void that divided the world into two in its wake. Before anyone could react, the sea prison trapping Shurfeng's group split in half, and a massive void spanning over 1,000 yards opened up in the ocean. Seawater then flooded into the dark void, creating spectacular waterfalls. Surging waves carried the nearby ships toward this spatial tear, and the ships that fell into the void had their crews instantly vaporized. The 1,000+ war blood members maintaining the sea prison's magic array spat out blood on the spot and fell into a mentally weakened state. It was evident that they had suffered a severe backlash from the barriers breaking. Meanwhile, a dark void had replaced the area Autumn Plant originally occupied. As for Autumn Plant himself, he was nowhere in sight. Chapter 2798. Another Tier 4. No, this is impossible. Inkfeather and the other war blood members were thunderstruck by the scene before them. The sea prison was an ancient magic array capable of trapping even superior mythic monsters, yet it had shattered from just one attack. Moreover, this same attack had also annihilated Autumn Plant, a Tier 4 great wizard. How could they possibly believe this? Shifeng and Autumn Plant were both Tier 4 players, so how could there be such a huge disparity between them? Not to mention, Shifeng had executed his attack while under the sea prison's suppression. Even if Autumn Plant truly wasn't a match for Shifeng, he shouldn't be utterly powerless to resist the attack. Nevertheless, let alone putting up a fight, Autumn Plant couldn't even escape. Divine Shadow and the other Heaven's Blade members also couldn't help gaping in shock at this scene. After watching Shifeng's heaven-splitting slash, they finally understood the true strength of Tier 4 existences, and why God's Domain's NPCs would behave so fearfully and respectfully toward Tier 4 existences. Shifeng had transformed the terrain with just one attack. If a full-blown fight ensued between two Tier 4 existences, the effect the fight would have on the surroundings would be unimaginable. Vice Commander, what should we do now? The sea prison is already broken, and Vice Commander Autumn has been killed. I'm afraid that we, a level 122 Tier 3 assassin asked worriedly as he looked at Inkfeather. Have everyone retreat? Inkfeather said, gritting her teeth. Also, notify the commander of everything that happened here. Black Flame is no longer someone we can handle. We need Secret Hand's assistance. Understood. The Tier 3 assassin breathed out a sigh of relief when he heard Inkfeather's words. If they were to fight Shifeng, they would die without question. Subsequently, Warblood's members frantically retreated to Dragonheart Island, many of them even using Tier 3 instantaneous movement scrolls or other life-saving scrolls. Their reaction was because they knew very clearly just how terrifying a Tier 4 player could be. While more than 3,000 yards might separate them from Shifeng right now, the swordsman could probably close the distance in just a few seconds if he flew at full speed. Black Flame. Warblood will remember this transgression. We will be waiting for you on Dragonheart Island. Inkfeather bellowed. With Shifeng's group rapidly approaching, she promptly activated her Tier 3 instantaneous movement scroll and disappeared, abandoning the bound Heaven's Blades members. 2 seconds after Inkfeather disappeared, Shifeng's group of 4 arrived before Divine Shadow and the others. Those people were so arrogant before, yet they ran away even faster than rabbits. Solitary 9 burst into laughter when he saw that none of Warblood's Tier 3 experts remained in the vicinity. In response, Lifeless Thorn also laughed and said, "It's normal. They know that they'll just die even if they stay behind. After all, even their sole Tier 4 expert died, so Tier 3 players like themselves wouldn't be able to do anything." The strength Shifeng displayed was truly astonishing. Let alone Warblood's members, even Lifeless Thorn himself was shocked. During the fight with the infant golden dragon, Shifeng had forcibly cancelled his summoning. The backlash had drastically reduced both his concentration and basic attributes throughout the raid. And although he had activated a berserk skill near the end of the raid, the skill only allowed him to just barely participate in the fight. Hence, one could say that Shifeng had never exerted his normal strength in the entire infant dragon raid. However, when Shifeng went up against Autumn Plant, he had already fully recovered. Only Lifeless Thorn had never imagined that Shifeng had already become so strong. Now Lifeless Thorn wouldn't find it strange if Shifeng could go toe-to-toe against a superior mythic monster. After all, the attack Shifeng executed earlier was simply astonishing. It definitely carried power at the Tier 5 standard. Guild Leader Black Flame. I am Vice Commander Divine Shadow of the Heaven's Blade Adventurer team. I really have to thank you for your help this time. If not for you, we would have definitely been imprisoned by Warblood for 15 days. Divine Shadow, who had been freed from his restraints, hurriedly stepped forward to thank Shifeng. At this moment, the only feeling in his heart was a deep sense of awe. In the past, Divine Shadow only considered Shifeng a local tyrant who had better luck than others. In his opinion, so long as he got promoted to Tier 4, he wouldn't be inferior to Shifeng in any way. However, Divine Shadow now found his previous thoughts laughable. After all, in terms of strength, Shifeng and he were like the sun and a candle. Even if he really managed to get promoted to Tier 4, he doubted he could last a single move against Shifeng. As for Cleansing Flame, when she looked at Shifeng, complicated emotions momentarily filled her heart. Previously, it was only thanks to Shifeng's help that Heaven's Blade had managed to survive the existential threat it faced. Originally, she thought that with the significant improvements she made during this period, she had shortened the gap between herself and Shifeng. However, it seemed that the gap between them had widened even further instead. In fact, Shifeng had become so strong that she could no longer grasp just how powerful he was exactly. It's nothing. I just happened to pass by, Shifeng said, chuckling as he looked at Divine Shadow. Team leader Luo and I were trapped in the same place for some time. After we left that place, we appeared near Dragonheart Island. Can you tell me what Dragonheart Island's present situation is like? Although the World Stone allowed him to log in and out of God's domain anytime he wanted, he had not logged off for several consecutive days because he had focused on grinding for levels. Meanwhile, God's domain was a game that was constantly changing. Several days was more than enough time for significant changes to sweep through the entire God's domain, let alone a small area like Dragonheart Island. Dragonheart Island was a location he had paid constant attention to as well as one of Zero Wing's development focuses. The World Tower on Dragonheart Island was incredibly special. Even Tier 5 players could benefit from it, because there were plenty of ancient ruins hidden inside. In addition, once communication between the two main continents of God's domain increased in frequency, Dragonheart Island would become an important trade hub. Hence, he had established roots on Dragonheart Island a long time ago. However, due to the many matters he had to deal with on the eastern continent, he had no choice but to leave Dragonheart Island's matters to someone else. As a result, Zero Wing had never been able to develop properly on Dragonheart Island. Now that his strength had undergone a qualitative transformation, and he also possessed massive wealth, he would naturally have to write Zero Wing's development on Dragonheart Island into his agenda. After all, Dragonheart Island had plenty of rare and precious resources. In fact, the rare basic materials that he needed for the construction of the small mobile fortress could all be found on the island. This was also one of the reasons why he had decided to head to Dragonheart Island directly. I see. Realization dawned upon Divine Shadow when he heard Shifeng's words. He now roughly understood why Luo was with Shifeng's party. He then shook his head and sighed. Guild leader Black Flame. Dragonheart Island has already become Warblood's private playground. Outside forces are unable to interfere with Dragonheart Island's affairs at all. Even Heaven's Blade has been forced to disband because of Warblood. Is it because of an NPC force? Shifeng asked. Somehow, Blood Oath actually managed to partner up with the Secret Hand Association, Dragonheart Island's strongest NPC force. Because of this, even Dragonheart Island's local superpowers have to abide by Warblood's will to avoid getting targeted, Divine Shadow answered, his heart brimming with hatred toward Warblood. If not for the Secret Hand Association, Warblood couldn't have forced Heaven's Blade to disband no matter what. Even if Warblood had Autumn Plant, it would still be incredibly difficult for one Tier 4 player to deal with the entirety of Heaven's Blade inside the vast World Tower. Naturally, it was also impossible for one Tier 4 Great Wizard to besiege a fortress. However, it was a different story for NPC forces. Even the weakest NPC force operating on Dragonheart Island had several Tier 4 NPCs under its command, what more the Secret Hand Association. According to the information Heaven's Blade found, the Secret Hand Association had as many as 14 Tier 4 NPCs. Moreover, some of these Tier 4 NPCs even held considerably high positions in Dragonheart City. Hence, it was a piece of cake for the Secret Hand Association to deal with a player force like Heaven's Blade in Dragonheart City. Most importantly, after the system's major update, NPCs no longer had any restrictions placed on them. While NPCs might still hesitate to take action inside an NPC city, once outside the city, NPCs could freely attack players. Therefore, Any player force that dared to oppose Warblood would have their members hunted by the Secret Hand Association outside Dragonheart City. However, getting hunted and killed by the Secret Hand Association's NPCs still wasn't the worst part. In fact, getting killed would have been preferable. After all, these NPCs could actually imprison players for up to 15 natural days. Let alone Tier 3 peak experts. Even Tier 3 Apex experts couldn't afford such a penalty. I see. No wonder Warblood dares to be so arrogant. After hearing Divine Shadow's explanation, Shurfeng more or less understood his frustration. Even in his previous life, such occurrences had been prevalent after God's Domain's first major update. Now that most players had yet to reach even Tier 3, they would find it even more impossible to oppose NPC forces. Guild Leader Black Flame, now that you've killed Autumn Plant, I'm certain Inkfeather will relay this matter to Blood Oath. Since they know they're no match for you, they will definitely contact Secret Hand. However, Secret Hand should take some time to react. Hence, my suggestion is that we leave Dragonheart Island's vicinity during this time. That way, those NPCs won't be able to do anything against us. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Although the Secret Hand Association was powerful, so long as they left the association's sphere of influence, the association's NPCs would most likely stop pursuing them. At worst, they would no longer be able to mingle on Dragonheart Island. However, God's Domain was a massive world. They could easily head to other locations to grind for levels. It wouldn't be too late for them to seek payback once they raised their strength. No, I won't be leaving with you. I still have some matters I need to deal with on Dragonheart Island, Shurfeng said, shaking his head. Smiling, he continued, moreover, I have a debt to collect from Warblood. After Shurfeng finished speaking, Yuluo added in a determined tone, that's right. I'm also going to Dragonheart Island to meet with the commander. I will definitely make Warblood pay. Divine Shadow couldn't help growing anxious at Yuluo's words. They had gone to great lengths to escape from Dragonheart Island. If Yuluo were to head to Dragonheart Island now, it would be a one-way trip. Yuluo stopped fooling around. Guild Leader Black Flame is a Tier 4 player, so he might not have any problems, but you are. An astonishing aura suddenly burst forth from Yuluo's body, interrupting Divine Shadow and subjecting him and the others to powerful pressure. The aura Yuluo released was even more frightening than Autumn Plant's. Divine Shadow was dumbfounded when he sensed Yuluo's aura. Only after a long time did he manage to ask, You've reached Tier 4? Chapter 2799. Returning to Dragonheart City in response to Divine Shadow's question, Yuluo faintly smiled and nodded. I was lucky to get promoted, thanks to Guild Leader Black Flame. Despite Yuluo's humble response, her affirmation still dumbfounded Divine Shadow. However, the life aura Yuluo radiated couldn't be faked. Basic attributes couldn't make up for the difference in life rating he sensed. Team Leader Yuluo, you're amazing. Cleansing Flame was similarly stunned by the revelation. After snapping out of her daze, she exclaimed joyfully, Now that you've gotten promoted to Tier 4, that makes you Dragonheart Island's second Tier 4 expert. If the commander finds out about this, she'll definitely be tickled pink. The current era no longer belonged to Tier 3 players but to Tier 4 players. So long as a power gained a Tier 4 player, it would receive a significant boost to its status and authority, and even NPC forces would not dare offend it recklessly. When Divine Shadow remained in a daze even after a long time had passed, Yuluo smiled and prompted, Vice Commander Shadow, may I return to Dragonheart City together with Guild Leader Black Flame now? You are now a Tier 4 player, so I naturally can't stop you. There is also no need to stop you, Divine Shadow replied, sighing. He never thought that after not seeing each other for only a month, Yuluo would have already grown into an existence he had to look up to. He then continued, however, I will return with you. Things on Dragonheart Island have changed significantly after the major update. You can avoid a lot of unnecessary trouble if you have me guiding you. Vice Commander, I'll go with you too. Currently, after the Commander, I have the highest status in Dragonheart City, out of everyone in Heaven's Blade. With me around, those NPCs shouldn't make too much trouble for us. Cleansing Flame volunteered. Status? Trouble? Yuluo was confused by Cleansing Flame's words. since when did players require a certain degree of status to enter Dragonheart City? On the other hand, Shifeng understood what Cleansing Flame meant. After the system's first major update, aside from NPCs becoming the majority in God's domain, NPCs would also start behaving more realistically. This was especially true for the various NPC forces. Although NPC forces were powerful, most of them still operated under the banner of specific kingdoms, empires, or neutral cities like Dragonheart City. Hence, ostensibly, these NPC forces wouldn't dare mess around with players in NPC cities. However, that did not stop these NPC forces from abusing their positions to harass player forces. One example would be imposing pointless inspections on players trying to enter or exit the city, which wasted their time. Hence, a player's status in NPC cities became very important. However, the status mentioned here was different from the noble ranks players gained. Having status in an NPC city meant obtaining a position carrying actual power in the city. As for the noble ranks players gained previously, they were merely empty titles after the major update took place. Noble ranks no longer granted players actual power in an NPC city, only benefits such as the ability to recruit personal guards. Take Shifeng's visit to the Twin Towers Kingdom's capital city, for example. The way the senior administrator of the city hall there referred to him was completely different from how most NPCs referred to him before the major update. The senior administrator hadn't addressed Shifeng with honorifics such as Bronze Legatee, Lord Earl, etc. Instead, the NPC merely addressed him as Sir. Only after Shifeng had taken out the War Gods Temple's certification did the NPC change his address to Lord Guild Leader. This was because he was the guild leader of a guild the War Gods Temple recognized officially. In NPC cities, his status was roughly equivalent to the deputy city lords. Without the War Gods Temple's certification, though, Shifeng would merely be an insignificant existence to the senior administrator. Of course, had Shifeng revealed his Tier 4 ranking, he would similarly receive different treatment. Only, compared to that of players holding actual positions of power, his treatment would still be slightly inferior. After all, no individual Tier 4 player would dare cause a ruckus in an NPC city unless they were tired of living. Hence, so long as an NPC wasn't an adventurer that frequently operated out in the fields, they wouldn't fear Tier 4 players at all. Alright, you can come with us. Divine Shadow couldn't help feeling a little helpless as he looked at Cleansing Flame. However, what she had said was also true. Previously, if not for Cleansing Flame holding the position of a squadron captain in Dragonheart City's Dragonheart Knight Legion, they would have had trouble even stepping out of the city's entrance, let alone escaping Dragonheart Island. Afterward, Divine Shadow secretly led Shifeng's group back to Dragonheart City. As for the other Heaven's Blade members, they used this opportunity to depart from Dragonheart Island's vicinity quickly to avoid the Secret Hand Association's pursuit. Dragonheart Island, Dragonheart City. Due to the system's major update, Dragonheart City had become much livelier. Now, NPCs of foreign races were everywhere in the city's port, and previously scarce Tier 3 NPCs crowded the port. Most of these NPCs were at level 130, with some even reaching level 150. They were practically comparable to the Tier 3 NPC guards of Dragonheart City. Meanwhile, Dragonheart City's player population had also increased significantly. This was especially true of Tier 3 independent experts. Roughly 30% of the Tier 3 independent experts operating in the major sea zones surrounding Dragonheart Island gathered here. As for the reason, firstly, Dragonheart City's trade market was much more prosperous than other locations. Here, one could purchase many items that normally couldn't be found in the outside world. For example, Dragonheart City's auction house sold epic weapons and equipment usable by players. The only problem was that the currency used here was not the standard coins but ancient coins. Secondly, the World Tower's fourth underground floor had Tier 4 legacy lands. Moreover, aside from independent experts, many of God's Domain's superpowers had also dispatched their members to develop on Dragonheart Island. Because of this situation, Dragonheart City most likely housed the largest number of Tier 3 players out of the various cities in God's Domain. This was also one of the reasons why Shifeng decided to visit Dragonheart City in person. However, before Shifeng and the others could enter Dragonheart City, they came across Inkfeather once more. At this time, Inkfeather and several hundred other War Blood members were carefully inspecting the players trying to enter the city. Even Blood Oath was standing by the entrance and quietly observing the moving crowd. His appearance at the entrance garnered a lot of attention from the surrounding players. What's going on? Why is Blood Oath here? I heard that someone killed one of Warblood's executives in the nearby waters. Blood Oath must have come to deal with those offenders personally. Crap! Who's the daring bastard that killed Warblood's members? The players began a quiet discussion among themselves as they looked at Blood Oath. They admired the person who dared kill Warblood's executive. After all, even the superpowers had to behave themselves around Warblood on Dragonheart Island. Otherwise, they would meet a tragic end. A single death definitely wouldn't be enough to compensate for the offense of killing one of Warblood's executives near Dragonheart Island. Hush! Keep your voice down. Don't you see that man beside Blood Oath? A level 122 Tier 3 ranger said, berating his guildmates. Pointing at a stalwart man clad in silvery knight armor standing beside Blood Oath, the ranger said, that person is Sabrid, one of the Secret Hand Association's Tier 4 NPCs. He is also one of the vice commanders of the city's Knight Legion. If he hears you, you'll be locked up for several days. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. At the ranger's warning, his party members promptly stopped speaking. The name Sabrid was one they were very familiar with. This NPC was precisely why the various superpowers seeking to establish roots on Dragonheart Island had suffered severe losses. These foreign superpowers had many of their Tier 3 experts caught and jailed in Dragonheart City's prison for 3 days. The reason for their imprisonment was that they had offended Sabrid. Damn it! Blood Oath actually managed to get Sabrid here in such a short time. Divine Shadow's complexion darkened when he saw the knight standing beside Blood Oath. That Sabrid will definitely cause all sorts of problems for us to prevent us from entering the city, and so long as we show even the slightest sign of aggression, he'll abuse his authority to have guards capture us. Before Divine Shadow could finish explaining, Blood Oath noticed Shurfeng's group, and a sly smile appeared on his face. Lord Sabrid, I found those troublemakers, Blood Oath said to Sabrid as he pointed at Shurfeng's group. It's those people. That man standing in the lead even let Heaven's Blade's remnants get away, disrupting Warblood's expansion plans completely. Is that so? Sabrid, who looked to be in his early 40s, looked at the location Blood Oath indicated. Narrowing his eyes, he said to the soldier standing beside him, bring them to me. If they resist, you know what to do, right? Leave it to us, Vice Commander. The level 150 Tier 3 soldier smiled and nodded. He then led a team of around a dozen guards and approached Shurfeng's group. Chapter 2800 Silent Entrance. Upon seeing the squad of NPC soldiers walk out of the entrance, the Warblood members standing by the gate looked at Shurfeng's group triumphantly. The soldier squad consisted of 12 level 150, Tier 3 NPC soldiers. These NPCs were already close to 30 levels higher than the current average level of Tier 3 players in God's domain. In addition, these NPCs also possessed the identity of Dragonheart City's soldiers. After the major update, the NPC soldiers of NPC cities were no longer as rigid as before, enforcing all rules thoroughly and behaving impartially in their judgment. Instead, these NPC soldiers had become humanized, bending the rules to their liking. They could be strict with some and lenient with others. Meanwhile, so long as their actions fell within the permissible range of the rules, players would be utterly helpless against them. Vice Commander Feather, let's see how Black Flame can continue acting arrogantly. Snowy Afterglow, who had reached level 123, said to Ink Feather as he watched the NPC soldiers approach Shurfeng's group. Even if he's Tier 4, he will still have to behave here. Black Flame isn't a simple person. If he can restrain his temper with his status as a Tier 4 player, these soldiers won't dare make things too difficult for him, Ink Feather said, shaking her head. Everything will depend on Black Flame's subsequent actions. Forbearance was a basic quality leaders of guilds possessed. As the guild leader of Zero Wing, Shurfeng naturally possessed this quality too. If Shurfeng decided to behave this time, the means they could use against him wouldn't be very effective. If they failed to exact their revenge on Shurfeng now, the only thing they could do was ambush him outside Dragonheart Island. He has always been arrogant. I doubt he'll tolerate this humiliation, Snowy Afterglow said. Even if he can, so long as he dares show even a little bit of resistance or behave disrespectfully to Lord Sabrid, we'll be able to take care of him. Let's hope so. Inkfeather also hoped that Shurfeng would choose not to tolerate the NPC guards' harassment. That way they would have an easy time dealing with him. While the soldiers were approaching Shurfeng's group, the surrounding players who saw this scene couldn't help stopping to spectate the situation. What's the matter with these soldiers? They can actually leave the entrance on their own initiative? Wait, that assassin seems to be Divine Shadow, one of Heaven's Blade's vice-commanders. What? Heaven's Blade's members actually took the initiative to show themselves? Are they tired of living? The surrounding players recognized Divine Shadow in no time at all and were astonished. After all, Warblood had long since placed a bounty on all of Heaven's Blade's members in Dragonheart City. By showing up at the city's entrance now, Heaven's Blade's members were basically throwing themselves into the jaws of death. Now that these NPC soldiers are going straight for them, they're seriously doomed. These NPCs are first-rate when it comes to making life difficult for others. They interrogated me for 2 whole hours the last time I came here. If I hadn't bribed them with a magic crystal, I would have most likely had to wait for a few more hours before I could enter the city. These soldiers are probably the Secret Hand Association's members as well. If Heaven's Blade's members get detained, it definitely won't end with just a few hours of interrogation. These soldiers will most likely corner them until they speak out in retaliation. And if they do that, they'll be jailed right away. Seeing the NPC soldiers taking the initiative to walk away from the entrance, the surrounding players looked at Shurfeng's group in pity. However, none of them stepped forward to help. After all, it would be an express train to hell if they did so. While the surrounding players were discussing quietly among themselves, the 12 NPC soldiers had surrounded Shurfeng's group. Dragonheart City is in chaos right now, so our superior has instructed us to tighten inspections to prevent people from making trouble in the city. Not only are you bunch acting suspiciously, but you are even concealing your identities with cloaks. Remove your cloaks and come with us, said the rough-looking guard heading the squad. Sneering, he added, rest assured, the interrogation will be over quickly. It'll only take around a dozen hours, so it won't delay you for too long. Oh right. Just in case, please open your spatial bags and let us inspect them. We cannot let you bring any prohibited items into the city. As soon as the head soldier finished speaking, the other guards began smiling as well. That's right. Hurry up and open your bags. Don't worry. We won't take any of your items. We'll only take a look at them. Right. It's just for an inspection. This is for Dragonheart City's safety. The several NPC soldiers laughed as they looked at Shurfeng. Meanwhile, Divine Shadow's complexion turned ashen when he heard the soldiers' words. He had never imagined that the Secret Hand Association's NPCs would be so ruthless. A spatial bag was a player's greatest secret. Revealing the contents of a player's bag to other players would not only potentially attract trouble, but also expose their trump cards. Excuse me, but we don't plan on entering Dragonheart City, Divine Shadow said, rejecting the soldiers' demand outright. There was no way they could allow the soldiers to inspect their bags. This was especially true for Shurfeng, the guild leader of Zero Wing. It was evident that these soldiers were trying to pick a fight with them. Now, their only choice was to abandon their plan to enter Dragonheart City. However, the head soldier smiled when he heard Divine Shadow's refusal. It doesn't matter whether you enter the city or not. In fact, you bunch look even more suspicious now. So, there is an even greater need for you to be checked. You'd best open your spatial bags quick. Otherwise, my brothers and I will personally take action, the head soldier said, raising his hand. Immediately, the 11 other soldiers gripped their weapons and released their killing intent. However, as these soldiers gripped their weapons, Cleansing Flame stepped forward. She then took out a bronze token from her bag. I am Cleansing Flame, a captain of the Dragonheart Knight Legion. These people are my companions. I can prove that they have no problems, Cleansing Flame said. In a slightly annoyed tone, she continued, moreover, you people from the City Defense Legion are responsible for maintaining order within the city, not outside. You are overstepping your boundaries. When Cleansing Flame took out her Dragonheart Knight token, Divine Shadow breathed out a sigh of relief, glad that he had brought her along. Otherwise, they would have gotten caught in the Secret Hand Association's trap. As Dragonheart City's trump card Legion, the Dragonheart Knight Legion was far superior to the City Defense Knight Legion. Moreover, the City Defense Knight Legion did not have the authority to inspect members of the Dragonheart Knight Legion. The Dragonheart Knight Legion? Looking at Cleansing Flame, the head soldier smiled nonchalantly and said, "Since you are a member of the Dragonheart Knight Legion, we naturally have no right to inspect you. However, that is not the case for your companions. They are acting suspiciously and are even wearing cloaks. As Dragonheart City's first line of defense, we have a responsibility to maintain the city's safety. Hence we cannot leave them be. They must be checked." "You," the soldier's words enraged Cleansing Flame. "I will report this to Commander Anos." "Go tell him then. I believe Commander Anos will understand our painstaking efforts," the head soldier said, smiling. "However, before that, your companions must undergo inspection. I will give you only 10 seconds to consider. If you don't open your bags yourselves, don't blame us for doing it for you." As the head soldier finished speaking, the other soldiers readied their weapons. It was evident that they did not plan on giving Shifeng's group any chance to escape. Meanwhile, when the surrounding players saw this scene, they gasped. How ruthless! Sure enough, nobody can afford to offend Warblood on Dragonheart Island. No wonder even the superpowers dare not disrespect Warblood on Dragonheart Island. Although many of the players present would normally suffer at the hands of these NPC soldiers, the soldiers would only put them through long hours of interrogation at most. This was definitely the first time the players had seen these soldiers draw their weapons against players. Ha ha ha! Amazing! Amazing! As expected of Secret Hands members. I want to see what that black flame is going to do now. Snowy Afterglow burst into laughter when he saw this scene. I heard that Black Flame has many treasures on him. If we can get him to reveal those treasures, all our efforts this time would definitely be worthwhile. Inkfeather also nodded in agreement with Snowy Afterglow's words. In reality, even she did not think that the Secret Hand Association would be so ruthless. Now Shifeng was truly between a rock and a hard place. Whether he chose to anger the guards or reveal his spatial bag for everyone to see, he would still suffer in the end. Black Flame. Now it's my turn to let you know what it feels like to live in misery. When Blood Oath saw the scene playing out before him, the smile on his face grew even brighter. Previously, when Shifeng had killed him during the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's conference, Blood Oath's reputation had plummeted on Dragonheart Island. However, the tables had turned now. After partnering with the Secret Hand Association, Blood Oath had always hoped that Shifeng would come to Dragonheart Island. To ensure this happened, he had even had his subordinates provoke Zero Wing frequently. Now, his chance for vengeance had arrived. This was also only the first step of Blood Oath's vengeance. Even if Shifeng agreed to the soldiers' demand, he still had plenty of things prepared for Shifeng afterward. It wouldn't matter even if Shifeng was a Tier 4 player. Dragonheart City was different from the average NPC city. In terms of combat power, Dragonheart City was even stronger than the capital cities of some empires. Moreover, as Dragonheart City was a neutral city, the identities and positions one held in kingdoms and cities did not matter here. Only Dragonheart City's identities and statuses. This was also why the various superpowers had no choice but to submit to Warblood. While everyone was secretly discussing the situation, Divine Shadow whispered to Shifeng, "I'm sorry for this situation, Guild Leader Black Flame. I'll hold them back afterward, so run away when you get the chance. These soldiers won't dare abandon their post, so as long as you leave Dragonheart Island's vicinity, they won't continue chasing you." Their only way out of this situation now was to flee. Confronting these NPC soldiers would only mean death for them. If they did that, they would be playing into Blood Oath's hands. Hence, Divine Shadow decided to exchange his own life for everyone else's freedom. "No, that won't be necessary," Shifeng said, shaking his head. "Leave the rest to me." Guild Leader Black Flame? Divine Shadow was a little confused as he looked at Shifeng. There was clearly no room for reconciliation between them and the NPC soldiers. Aside from escaping, he simply couldn't figure out how they could get out of this situation. At this moment, let alone Divine Shadow, even Yu Luo found this situation strange. She couldn't understand what Shifeng could possibly do in this situation either. When the head soldier saw Shifeng stepping forward, he grinned and asked, "What? Have you made up your mind?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Shifeng was the person Vice Commander Sabret had singled out. No matter what Shifeng's answer was, the head soldier would have ways to make things difficult for him. Made up my mind? Chuckling, Shifeng said, "Indeed, I have made up my mind." "Good." Nodding, the head soldier said, "Then, open up your spatial bag." As soon as the head soldier finished speaking, Shifeng made his move. The next moment, a fleeting flash appeared before Shifeng, and the head soldier's body got bisected. The soldier's 20 million HP instantly fell to zero, the two halves of his body spraying blood all over the place as they fell to the ground. Chapter 2801. Combating a Tier 4 NPC. He killed the NPC? How dare he? Everyone present was taken aback when they saw the head soldier bisected. Even Divine Shadow and Cleansing Flame had their mouths hanging wide open, neither of them having expected Shifeng to take action. Moreover, not only did Shifeng take action, but he had even directly killed an NPC soldier. This was simply, this guy is doomed. He's definitely dead. He actually killed one of Dragonheart City's NPC soldiers. This won't end with just a few weeks' imprisonment. Dragonheart City was a neutral city. Hence, its management was much stricter than that of NPC cities in kingdoms and empires. Before the major system update took place, players who killed another player or NPC within Dragonheart City would not only be killed on the spot, but also be prohibited from logging into the game for a month. And when they could log back into the game, they would lose 10 levels and have their souls placed into a weakened state for 10 days. This penalty would basically cripple a player's account. Now, not only did Shifeng commit murder after the system update, but the person he killed was even an NPC soldier. At this point, everyone no longer dared imagine what kind of punishment he would receive should he be killed or caught. Inkfeather and the other War Blood members standing by the entrance were caught off guard by Shifeng's actions. How much courage does he possess? Inkfeather couldn't believe her eyes as she took in Shifeng's casual appearance. Did he lose his mind? She had thought of the possibility of Shifeng resisting the NPC soldiers and escaping. However, the possibility of him killing an NPC soldier had never occurred to her. Yet, Shifeng had executed this feat so decisively. As for Blood Oath, when he saw this scene, he became ecstatic. Good. As expected of the first player to get promoted to Tier 4. Blood Oath sneered. Unfortunately, today will be the day you fall. However, before everyone could recover from the surprise of seeing Shifeng kill the head soldier, Shifeng brandished the abyssal blade once more. The next moment, a galaxy of stars appeared around Shifeng and enveloped the 11 NPC soldiers remaining of the squad. Swords orbit. Damages exceeding 50 million appeared above the Tier 3 NPCs' heads one after another, the 11 NPC soldiers getting killed instantly. A bunch of useless fools. Do you think Dragonheart City's rules have any use against me? Shifeng said as he glanced at the fallen NPC soldiers indifferently. He then sheathed the abyssal blade casually as if he hadn't done anything to speak of. If it were before he had entered the ancient god's domain, he would still have to be wary of Dragonheart City's rules. However, he no longer had such worries now. At Shifeng's words, a deathly silence momentarily enveloped the surrounding area. He's nuts. He's definitely nuts. Who is this guy? He actually dares slaughter Dragonheart City's NPC soldiers? When the spectators saw Shifeng's actions, some felt crazed, some felt fearful, some felt excited, and some felt awed. One thing was for certain, though Shifeng's feat of killing 11 NPC soldiers in one go would be forever etched in their minds. Without a doubt, Shifeng was the most ruthless player in God's domain. The surrounding players became curious about Shifeng's identity. Meanwhile, when the silver-armored knight Sabret saw this scene, his eyes turned bloodshot, and the intensity of his aura skyrocketed. He no longer suppressed his aura, thoroughly displaying the power of a level 160, Tier 4 NPC. His aura was so overbearing that everyone nearby shuddered involuntarily. Outrageous. You dare lay hands on the City Defense Knight Legion. Don't even think of leaving this place alive today. Sabret bellowed as he leaped into the air. Simultaneously, the other NPC soldiers stationed at the entrance also took action, their numbers exceeding 100. We're really doomed this time, Divine Shadow despaired when he saw Sabret taking action. He couldn't understand why Shifeng had acted so rashly. Their group stood no chance against a level 160, Tier 4 NPC, even though Shifeng was Tier 4. After all, NPCs possessed not only higher basic attributes than players but also superior mana control. Their weapons and equipment were likewise superior to those of players in general. However, while Divine Shadow and Cleansing Flame were despairing over this matter, two voices of complaint entered their ears. Guild leader, you're too fast. That's right. You should have told us in advance if you were going to attack. At least give us some time to prepare. The next moment, both Lifeless Thorn and Solitary 9 took out their weapons in frustration, evidently intending to fight these NPC soldiers. Have they lost their minds too? Divine Shadow and Cleansing Flame were on the brink of mental collapse at this moment. Shifeng was famous for being an arrogant guild leader, so while his reaction was shocking, it was still within the realm of expectations. However, what was up with the two players following Shifeng? Luo, though, did not appear surprised by Lifeless Thorn and Solitary 9's actions. She too grabbed her staff and said quietly to Divine Shadow and Cleansing Flame, Vice Commander, Flame, wait behind us. I'll deal with the NPCs coming at us. BIL 11/B at Luo's words. Divine Shadow and Cleansing Flame turned to the cleric in surprise and confusion. What had become of this world? Was this really the same Luo they knew? Seeing the two's horrified eyes, Luo smiled and consoled, don't worry. Nothing will happen. We're just dealing with a bunch of NPC soldiers. Out of everyone present, she reacted the calmest to Shifeng's actions. As she had reached Tier 4 herself, she understood quite well that Tier 4 powerhouses were no pushovers. Even the NPCs in the Ancient Gods domain didn't dare offend Tier 4 players. Yet, these Tier 3 NPCs in the Modern Gods domain actually dared do so. They were simply tired of living. After all, even the Kings of Kingdoms dared not casually offend Tier 4 powerhouses. She had to admit that while some NPCs had grown smarter after gaining conscious thought, some had grown dumber as well. Either that or pushing around Tier 3 players had become a habit for these Tier 3 NPCs, and they now assumed that the existence known as players were pushovers that didn't know how to retaliate. The fact that players still had the mindset that NPCs shouldn't be provoked had most likely contributed to this misconception as well. However, after experiencing life in the Ancient Gods domain, Luo understood very clearly that Gods domain never had any absolute rules. The only absolutes were strength and status. In the Ancient Gods domain, instances of players killing NPCs occurred frequently. Even killing city lords wouldn't be a problem so long as one could bear the consequences, and had the strength necessary to accomplish the feat read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Hence, she found it laughable that Warblood thought it could rule over Dragonheart City without fear just because it had gained the support of an NPC force. Warblood was utterly ignorant of the fact that after players reached Tier 4, they would be living in a completely different world from Tier 3 players. At this time, Sabret had already arrived in the air above Shifeng's group, and was looking at Shifeng with anger in his eyes. This was because even he hadn't expected that Shifeng would dare kill the soldiers. Furthermore, he would be held responsible for their deaths. Unable to hold back his anger, he bellowed, "Foolish heaven-blessed individual. Do you think nobody can punish you just because you've reached Tier 4? None of you will escape today." After saying so, Sabret unslung the snowy white greatsword he carried on his back and executed a slash at Shifeng. A sword light shot at Shifeng, leaving behind a black tear in space that extended hundreds of yards away. The power of this attack could heavily injure even a mythic monster of the same level. Tier 4 skill, Sky-Splitting Flash. Well said. Looking at Sabret's approaching attack, Shifeng said leisurely, however, "You provoked the wrong person." After saying so, Shifeng unsheathed the Light of Two Worlds and brandished it. Chapter 2802 Power of Two Worlds Swords Orbit. Boom! When the two attacks collided, a powerful shockwave spread to several hundred yards away. Even the nearby Tier 3 expert stumbled a few steps back, while the Tier 2 players went flying several dozen yards. He blocked it. Who is he? The spectating players were stunned when they saw Shifeng still standing in his original position. Despite going up against a level 160 Tier 4 NPC's Tier 4 skill, Shifeng was actually an even match, emerging from the exchange unscathed. At this time, let alone the spectators, even Sabred was surprised by this situation. Surprised? Looking at Sabred's slightly bewildered expression, Shifeng smiled faintly and said, "It seems that the vice commander of Dragonheart City's City Defense Knight Legion only amounts to this much." However, despite saying such words, Shifeng dared not be careless around Sabred. The Light of Two Worlds had indeed increased his basic attributes and the power of his sword-type skills significantly. Thanks to it and the several other fragmented legendary items he equipped, his basic attributes reached an astonishing level. Although he still wasn't a match for superior mythic monsters of the same level, he wasn't that far off either. However, Sabred was at level 160, 20 levels higher than Shifeng. In terms of basic attributes, Shifeng definitely lost to Sabred by a large margin. Hence, the only way he could beat the NPC was by relying on his powerful mana and superior combat techniques. "Boy, you are courting death." Sabred grew even more enraged at Shifeng's words. Suddenly, the mana within a 1,000-yard radius began gathering around Sabred in a frenzy. It was evident that the knight had not used his full strength for the previous attack. After the gathered mana reached a critical point, Sabred instantly transformed into several dozen afterimages that surrounded Shifeng. The NPC was dazzlingly fast. Tier 4 skill Broken Shadow. At this time, even Shifeng couldn't tell which of these afterimages was the real Sabred. It felt as if the NPC had truly split into several dozen clones of himself. Before Shifeng could react, fiery runes appeared on Sabred's snowy white greatsword. The flames the runes gave off incinerating even space itself. Tier 4 taboo skill Starfire Blade. The next moment, every one of Sabred's afterimages executed a slash. Despite the Starfire Blade being effective for only one attack in reality, Sabred had turned it into several dozen attacks. Amazing! As expected of a Knight Legion's vice commander, he actually managed to fuse his Tier 4 skills to such an extent. Shifeng couldn't help being in awe when he saw the several dozen attacks coming at him from all directions. Combining two skills was much more difficult than combining two spells. However, so long as one succeeded, one could dramatically increase the effectiveness of the skills. "Disappear!" Sabred bellowed. The power that his weapon radiated skyrocketing even further. It was clear he had stopped holding back and planned to slay Shifeng. Seeing the several dozen space-tearing greatswords approaching him, Shifeng held up his sword horizontally before him. Tier 4 legacy skill Blade Domain. Immediately, 7 magic swords materialized around Shifeng. The magic swords then transformed into innumerable stars in his surroundings. Swords orbit. Boom, boom, boom. A series of explosions and shockwaves blanketed the area in front of Dragonheart City's entrance. After several dozen clashes, the ground under Shifeng cracked, and the space around him shattered. His HP had fallen by more than 5 million as well, his HP bar falling by 1/3 of its capacity. He didn't die? Inkfeather's eyes widened in shock when she saw the amount of HP Shifeng lost, her mind refusing to believe this outcome. Sabred was a level 160 Tier 4 NPC. Moreover, he was the vice commander of one of Dragonheart City's Knight Legions. His strength was above average even among Tier 4 NPCs. With his combination of a Tier 4 skill and a Tier 4 taboo skill, he could inflict significant damage on superior mythic monsters of the same level. Yet, Sabred's attack had only taken 1/3 of Shifeng's HP. Amazing. The power of this fusion attack actually reaches the Tier 5 basic rank. After taking a look at his remaining HP, Shifeng felt even greater admiration for Sabred. If he hadn't switched to the Light of Two Worlds, which raised all his sword-type skills by 1 level, he would have had to activate his Berserk skill to repulse Sabred's fusion attack. However, activating his Berserk skill would also mean that he had been pushed to his limits on the brink of death. After all, Berserk skills weren't unique to players. NPCs had them as well. "Boy, it seems you're quite sturdy." Sabred was inwardly astonished when he saw Shifeng still standing. He never imagined that a heaven-blessed individual could be so strong. "However, this is the end for you." After saying so, Sabred raised his greatsword into the air. Immediately afterward, A dozen identical greatswords appeared around him, forming a magic array. Tier 4 skill Blade Shadow. Tier 4 taboo skill Sealing Void. The next moment, the dozen greatswords transformed into black holes that shot toward Shifeng. Upon seeing the black holes spanning several dozen meters, the nearby spectators, both players and NPCs, fell into despair. This was because they could already foresee that once these black holes collided with the ground, the impact would vaporize everything within several hundred yards. Sure enough, Tier 4 NPCs are no pushovers. However, this still isn't enough to get rid of me. Shifeng smiled when he saw the descending black holes. Let's test this move on you. The next moment, Shifeng tightened his grip on the Light of Two Worlds and poured half of his mana into the weapon. Suddenly, crimson divine runes lit up all over the sword, releasing a dazzling and mesmerizing brilliance. As this dazzling light bloomed, a deathly silence enveloped the world around Shifeng. Even time itself seemed to flow significantly slower. Subsequently, Shifeng swung the Light of Two Worlds at Sabrid. World Breaker. Boom! A strange light instantly penetrated the descending black holes like a hot knife through butter before landing on Sabrid. When the strange light disappeared, time began flowing normally again. Meanwhile, the black holes in the sky had all disappeared. As for Sabrid, he had lost over half his HP from the attack, retaining only around 200 million HP. Cracks had also appeared on the armor he wore, and fresh blood flowed out from all over his body. However, before Sabrid could react, the slightly pale Shifeng had already arrived before the NPC. Not giving Sabrid any time to catch his breath, Shifeng brandished the Light of Two Worlds once more. Spatial Slash. Swords Transmigration. Although the fusion of skill and combat technique wasn't comparable to the fusion of skill and skill, the combination still increased the effectiveness of his skill significantly. The next moment, 6 sword lights tore through space and approached Sabrid. Reacting quickly, Sabrid held his greatsword horizontally before him and activated the Tier 4 defensive skill, Steel Fortress. The skill created a defensive barrier in front of him and increased his defense by 500% temporarily. 1 slash. 2 slashes. 3 slashes. Every one of Shifeng's attacks managed to slice through Sabrid's defensive barrier without fail, but the barrier still bought Sabrid enough time to defend against the attacks with his greatsword. Boom, boom, boom. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The next moment, explosions echoed throughout Dragonheart Island one after another. Simultaneously, Sabrid's HP fell time after time. When the last sword light collided with Sabrid's greatsword, the NPC got smashed into the ground at the speed of light, the impact creating a crater over a dozen meters deep. This last attack also zeroed Sabrid's HP, and the knight passed away with a reluctant look on his face. Meanwhile, Shifeng, hovering in the air, saw his experience bar filling up rapidly. In no time at all, a golden glow enveloped him as his level rose from level 140 to level 141. However, nobody paid any attention to Shifeng at this time. Instead, everyone had their heads down as they gaped at Sabrid's corpse lying in the crater. As if time had stopped moving, a deathly silence enveloped the entrance of Dragonheart City. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.